The conference room smelled of stale coffee and printer ink, the kind of scent that clings to corporate life like a second skin. I sat at the far end of the table, my hands folded tightly in my lap, the edges of my notebook digging into my palm. My glasses slipped slightly down my nose, but I didn't bother to push them up. My eyes were fixed on Derek, standing at the head of the room, his crisp navy suit catching the fluorescent light as he gestured toward the projector screen. His voice was smooth, confident, the kind that made clients lean forward in their chairs. He was presenting my asterisk idea. My months of late nights, my endless revisions, my heart poured into spreadsheets and mock-ups, and he was calling it his own. I don't think I breathed for the first 10 minutes. My chest felt like it was caving in, each word from his mouth a hammer against my ribs. I kept waiting for him to glance my way, to acknowledge me, even with a flicker of guilt. But Derek's eyes never left the client, a silver-haired man in a tailored suit who nodded along, scribbling notes. The room buzzed with approval, and I sat there, invisible, my idea shining under someone else's name. I'd always been the quiet one at the firm. Sophie Miller, the girl with the tidy desk and the quick fixes, nobody noticed until they saved the day. I liked it that way, mostly. I'd grown up in a small town upstate, where my mom used to say, "Let your work speak for you, Sophie. Flashy folks burn out fast." I believed her. I believed that if I kept my head down, poured my soul into my campaign, someone would see me. But that morning, as Derek basked in the applause, I realized I'd been wrong. My work wasn't speaking. It was being stolen. The memory of my mom's voice hit me hard, like the smell of her lavender soap when I was a kid, curled up on her lap after a bad day at school. She'd stroke my hair and tell me stories about her own battles, how she'd fought to keep our little bookstore open when the big chains moved in. "You don't win by shouting," she'd say. "You win by standing firm." I wanted to stand firm now, but my legs felt like they'd give out if I tried. When the meeting ended, I stayed in my seat staring at the crumbs on the table from someone's bagel. Carla, my closest friend at the firm, lingered by the door, her red lipstick a stark contrast to her worried frown. She raised an eyebrow, silently asking if I was okay. I gave her a small nod, but it was a lie. I wasn't okay. I was crumbling that night. I sat in my tiny Brooklyn apartment, the radiator hissing in the corner. My laptop glowed on the coffee table, open to the presentation I'd sent Derek weeks ago. I'd been so proud of it. A digital marketing strategy that blended AI-driven analytics with human storytelling. I'd spent months researching, sketching, tweaking. I'd pitched it to Derek in his corner office, my voice shaky but sure. He'd leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and said, "It's got potential, Sophie, but it's rough. Needs polish." I'd walked out feeling small, but I trusted him to guide me. I trusted him to be fair. Now, comma staring at the screen. I felt like a fool. The email I'd sent him was still there, time-stamped, with every detail of the campaign laid out. I scrolled through it, my stomach twisting. Every slide Derek had shown today was mine, word for word, down to the font I'd chosen. He hadn't even bothered to change the colors. I closed my laptop and leaned back on the couch, the city's hum seeping through the window. A siren wailed in the distance, and I thought about how New York always felt like it was moving too fast for me to catch up. I'd come here 6 years ago, fresh out of college, dreaming of making my mark. I'd pictured myself leading campaigns, my name on awards, my ideas sparking change. Instead, I was just another cog in a machine, grinding away while people like Derek soared. The next morning, I dragged myself to the office, my eyes gritty from lack of sleep. Carla was waiting by the coffee machine, her usual grin replaced by a fierce intensity. "You need to do something, Soph," she said, pouring me a cup. "He can't get away with this." Her voice was low, but it carried the kind of fire I wished I had. Carla was everything I wasn't: bold, loud, unafraid to call out nonsense. She'd once told off a client who tried to undercut her, and somehow she'd walked away with his respect. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, stirring sugar into my coffee just to have something to focus on. My hand trembled slightly, and I hated how weak it made me feel. "He's my boss, Carla. Who's going to believe me over him?" She leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. "You have proof, don't you? Emails? Files? Something?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I have the original presentation and the email I sent him." "Then use it," she said, like it was that simple. "Don't let him walk all over you." But it wasn't simple. Derek wasn't just my boss. He was the golden boy of the firm, the one who charmed clients and schmoozed with the senior partners. He had a way of making you feel like you were lucky to be in his orbit, even when he was cutting you down. I'd seen him do it to others, dismiss their ideas, take credit for their wins, all with a smile that made you question your own memory. Going up against him felt like stepping into a storm with no umbrella. Still, Carla's words stuck with me. That afternoon, I sat at my desk, pretending to work while I opened my email archives. I found the chain with Derek, every message a reminder of how naive I'd been. There was the initial pitch, the follow up questions he'd asked, the revisions I'd sent at 2 a.m. And then, buried in a folder I'd almost forgotten, I found something else, a draft of the contract for the client. My name was on it, listed as the lead strategist. My heart stopped. Derek had signed it in my name without telling me, claiming my idea as his own. I stared at the screen, my pulse racing. This wasn't just theft, it was fraud. He'd used my name to seal the deal, knowing I'd never see the contract. I felt a surge of anger, hot and unfamiliar, like a fire I didn't know I could carry. But beneath it was something heavier: betrayal. I'd trusted him. I'd believed in the system, in fairness, in the idea that hard work would be enough. I printed the contract and tucked it into my bag, my hands shaking. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but holding it felt like holding a piece of myself I'd lost. As I left the office, the city was bathed in the golden glow of late afternoon, the kind of light that makes everything look softer than it is. I walked past a street vendor selling flowers, their scent mingling with the exhaust of passing cabs. For a moment, I was 8 years old again, standing in my mom's bookstore, the smell of old pages and her chamomile tea wrapping around me like a hug. "You're stronger than you know, Sophie," she'd said once when I cried over a bully at school. I wished I could believe her now. That night, I sat on my couch, the contract spread out on the coffee table. I traced my name on the page, the ink smudged slightly where Derek's signature overlapped. I thought about confronting him, imagining his smug smile, the way he'd twist the truth until I doubted myself. I thought about going to HR, but Rachel Brooks, the director, was known for playing it safe, avoiding conflict unless it threatened the firm's bottom line. I thought about doing nothing, letting Derek win, fading back into the background like I always had. But then I thought about my mom, standing firm in her little shop, fighting for what was hers. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed late, the ideas I'd poured into this job, the dreams I'd carried to this city. And I realized I couldn't let this go. Not this time. I didn't sleep much that night. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Derek, not yet. I was going to be smarter than that. I was going to take back what was mine piece by piece until he had nowhere left to hide. The next few days at the office felt like walking through a fog. I went through the motions, answering emails, tweaking ad copy, nodding in meetings, but my mind was somewhere else, piecing together a plan. I kept the contract hidden in my bag, its weight a constant reminder of what was at stake. Every time I passed Derek's office, my stomach churned. He'd flash me a smile, all teeth and charm, and I'd force one back, hating how it made me feel like a coward. But I wasn't ready to show my hand. Not yet. Carla noticed the change in me. She cornered me in the break room one morning, her arms crossed, a thermos of green tea in one hand. "You're plotting something," she said, her voice low but teasing. "I can see it in your eyes. Spill." I glanced around, making sure we were alone. The hum of the coffee maker filled the silence, and I leaned against the counter, my fingers tracing the edge of my mug. "I found something," I said quietly. "A contract. Derek signed it in my name. Carla, for the campaign." Her eyes widened, and she let out a low whistle. "That's not just shady, that's illegal. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "I keep thinking about confronting him, but he'll just deny it. Or worse, he'll turn it around on me." Carla nodded, her expression softening. "He's slippery, I'll give him that, but you're not alone, Soph. You've got me, and I'm not afraid to make some noise if you need it." I smiled, grateful for her fire, but I knew this wasn't her fight, it was mine. And it wasn't just about the campaign anymore. It was about all the times I'd let myself be overlooked, all the moments I'd swallowed my voice because I thought it was the right thing to do. I remembered a day in high school, sitting in the library, my math teacher pulling me aside after class. "You're brilliant, Sophie," she'd said, her eyes kind but firm, "but you've got to stop hiding. The world won't see you unless you make it." I'd brushed it off then, embarrassed, but now her words echoed in my head, sharp and true. That afternoon, I started digging. I spent my lunch break in a quiet corner of the office, combing through my email archives, pulling every file related to the campaign. I found drafts, notes, even a voice memo I'd recorded late one night, brainstorming ideas in a sleepy haze. Each piece was a thread, weaving a story that couldn't be denied. I saved everything to an encrypted folder on my laptop, my heart pounding like I was committing a crime. But I wasn't. I was just reclaiming what was mine, Dot. The city outside my window felt alive that evening as I walked home, the air crisp with the first hint of fall. I stopped at a bodega to grab a sandwich, the cashier's radio playing an old jazz tune that reminded me of my dad. He used to hum along to Miles Davis while he fixed things around the house, his hands steady and sure. "You don't rush a job, Sophie," he'd say, tightening a screw. "You do it right or you don't do it at all." I wished I could call him now, hear his voice, but he'd passed 3 years ago, leaving a hole that still ached when I wasn't expecting it. I paid for my sandwich and stepped back into the street, the neon lights reflecting off the pavement like scattered stars. Dot. At home, I spread my evidence out on the coffee table, the contract at the center like a map. I traced the lines of my name, the date, Derek's signature. It was proof, yes, but it wasn't enough on its own. Derek was too good at spinning stories, and I knew he'd have an excuse ready. Maybe he'd claim it was a mistake, or that I'd misunderstood my role. I needed someone with weight, someone the firm couldn't ignore. That's when I thought of James Carter. Dot. James was a senior partner, one of the few who didn't seem dazzled by Derek's charm. He was in his late 50s with graying hair and a quiet intensity that made you listen when he spoke. I'd worked with him on a project last year, a small campaign for Uncategorized, and he'd always been fair, even kind. He'd once told me my ideas were sharp and suggested I present them directly to the client, bypassing Derek. I'd been too shy to follow through, but his words had stuck with me. If anyone could help, it was him. The next morning, I requested a meeting with James. My hands were clammy as I sent the email, half expecting him to brush me off. But he replied within an hour, agreeing to meet me after lunch in his office. I spent the morning rehearsing what I'd say, my stomach in knots. By the time I knocked on his door, I felt like I might throw up. James's office was different from Derek's. No sleek glass desk or framed awards. It was cluttered, with books stacked on shelves and a photo of his kids on the windowsill. He looked up from his laptop, his glasses perched on his nose, and gestured for me to sit. "Sophie," he said, his voice warm but curious. "What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath, my fingers gripping the folder I'd brought. "I need to talk to you about the new campaign," I started, my voice steadier than I felt. "And about Derek." I laid it all out, the idea, the presentation, the contract, the emails. I showed him the evidence, my hands trembling as I passed him the papers. He listened quietly, his brow furrowing as he read. When I finished, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. I braced myself for skepticism, for questions I couldn't answer. Dot. But James leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "This is serious, Sophie," he said. "If what you're saying is true, and it looks like it is, Derek's crossed a line, a big one." I nodded, my throat tight. I didn't know what to do. I thought about going to HR, but I wasn't ongoing, but I wasn't sure they'd listen. "I thought you might understand." He studied me for a moment, then gave a small nod. "You did the right thing coming to me. Let me look into this. I'll need to talk to the client, verify the contract, but if this checks out, we'll take it to HR together. Derek's not untouchable, no matter what he thinks." Relief flooded me, but it was tempered by fear. I knew this was just the beginning. Derek wouldn't go down quietly, and I wasn't sure I was ready for the fight. But as I left James's office, the weight on my chest felt a little lighter. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was moving forward, not just standing still. Dot. That night, I called Carla and told her everything. She whooped so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "So, you're a badass, Soph," she said, laughing. "I knew you had it in you." I smiled, but I didn't feel like a badass. I felt scared, fragile, like one wrong move could unravel everything. But I also felt something new, a spark of determination, small but growing. I thought about my mom again, standing in her bookstore, refusing to let the big chains push her out. She'd fought her battles, and now I was fighting mine. Dot. The next few days were a blur. James kept me updated, his emails short but reassuring. He'd spoken to the client, who confirmed the contract and expressed interest in meeting me directly. Apparently, they'd been impressed with the campaign and wanted to know more about the mind behind it. I read the email 3 times, my heart pounding. It was the first time I'd felt seen, really seen, in years. But then came the twist I hadn't expected. James called me into his office one afternoon, his face unreadable. Sophie, he said, closing the door, there's something you need to know. Derek's been talking to HR. He's claiming asterisk you asterisk stole the idea from him. The room tilted. I gripped the armrest of my chair, my mind racing. What? I managed. That's insane. James nodded, his jaw tight. It's a desperate move. He knows we're onto him and he's trying to get ahead of it. But he's got no proof and you do. Still, this means things are going to get messy. I left his office in a daze, the city's noise swallowing me as I stepped outside. Derek was fighting back and he was fighting dirty. I should have seen it coming, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I wanted to run, to quit, to disappear. But then I thought about my evidence, my truth, the spark inside me that refused to go out. I wasn't running. Not this time. The air in my apartment felt heavy that night, like the walls were pressing in. I sat on the couch, my laptop open, staring at the email from James. Derek's accusation echoed in my head, each word a splinter under my skin. He's claiming you stole the idea from him. It was absurd, but it was also terrifying. Derek had a way of bending reality, of making people doubt what they knew was true. I'd seen him do it before. Charm a client into overlooking a missed deadline, convince a colleague their mistake was their fault. Now he was turning that skill on me. I closed my laptop and leaned back, my eyes drifting to the window. The city lights blurred into a haze, and I let my mind wander to a memory I hadn't thought of in years. I was 12, sitting on the porch of our house upstate, my dad whittling a piece of wood into a little bird. He'd been quiet that day, his hands steady but his eyes distant. People will try to take what's yours, Sophie, he'd said out of nowhere. Not just things, your time, your ideas, your heart. Don't let 'em. I'd nodded, not really understanding, but his words had stayed with me, tucked away like a seed waiting for the right moment to grow. Now, comma. That moment was here. I got up and poured myself a glass of water, the cold shocking my throat. I needed to focus. Derek's accusation was a lie, but lies could do damage if you didn't fight them. I opened my laptop again and pulled up my evidence, the emails, the drafts, the voice memo, the contract. Each file was a brick in the wall I was building, a defense against whatever Derek threw at me, but I knew it wasn't just about proof. It was about courage, about standing up in a room full of people who might not believe me and saying, asterisk, this is mine, asterisk. The next morning, I met Carla at a cafe near the office. It was one of those overpriced places with exposed brick walls and baristas who called themselves artisans. We sat by the window, the glass fogged from the October chill. Carla stirred her latte, her eyes fixed on me. So, he's playing dirty, she said, her voice low. What's your next move? I sipped my coffee, the bitterness grounding me. James says we're meeting with HR tomorrow. Rachel's going to hear both sides. I've got my evidence, but Derek's got him, his charm, his reputation. I'm scared, Carla. She reached across the table, her hand warm on mine. You've got more than evidence, Soph. You've got the truth. And you've got people who believe in you. Me, James, maybe even the client. Derek's slippery, but he's not bulletproof. I nodded, but my stomach was in knots. I thought about Rachel Brooks, the HR director. She was sharp, fair in theory, but I'd seen her dodge tough calls before, smoothing things over to keep the firm's machine running. Would she really take my side over Derek's? I wasn't sure. That afternoon, I went back to the office and prepared. I printed copies of my evidence, organized them in a folder, and rehearsed what I'd say. My desk was a mess, post-it notes, coffee stains, a half-dead plant I kept forgetting to water. But it felt like home, a small corner of the world I'd carved out. I glanced at the photo pinned to my cubicle wall, a shot of me and my mom at her bookstore's last anniversary party. She was laughing, her arm around me, and I looked so young, so sure the world was kind. I touched the photo, my throat tight. I'm trying, mom. Asterisk. The meeting with HR was set for 10 a.m. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if Rachel dismissed my evidence? What if Derek twisted the story so convincingly that even James doubted me? By the time I got to the office, my hands were clammy and my glasses kept fogging up from nerves. I wore my best blazer, a navy one I'd bought for a client pitch last year, hoping it would make me feel stronger than I did. Rachel's office was on the top floor with a view of the city that made you feel small. She sat behind her desk, her gray suit crisp, her expression unreadable. James was there, his arms crossed, and Derek stood by the window, his posture relaxed, like he was about to give a TED talk. I sat across from Rachel, my folder in my lap, my heart pounding so loud, I was sure everyone could hear it. Rachel started with the usual formalities, explaining the process, emphasizing confidentiality. I barely heard her. My eyes kept drifting to Derek, who was watching me with a faint smile, like he knew something I didn't. It made my skin crawl. Sophie, Rachel said, pulling me back, why don't you start? Tell us what happened. I took a deep breath and began. I told her about the campaign, how I'd developed it over months, how I'd pitched it to Derek. I described the meeting where he presented it as his own, the contract signed in my name. My voice shook at first, but as I spoke, it steadied. I handed her the folder, walking her through the emails, the drafts, the timestamps. I kept my eyes on her, not Derek, refusing to let him rattle me. When I finished, the room was quiet. Rachel flipped through the papers, her brow furrowed. James nodded slightly, his expression encouraging. Derek leaned forward, his smile gone, replaced by a look of calculated concern. Sophie's a talented employee, he said, his voice smooth as ever. But she's misunderstood the situation. This campaign was a team effort, and I was the one who shaped it into something the client could use. She's taking credit for work that was collaborative, and frankly, I'm disappointed she'd try to undermine me like this. I felt my face burn, anger and humiliation twisting together. He was lying, and he was doing it so easily, like it was nothing. I wanted to shout, to call him out, but I remembered James's advice. Asterisk, stay calm, let the evidence speak. So I waited, my hands clenched in my lap. Rachel turned to me. Sophie, do you have anything to add? I nodded, my voice steady now. The evidence speaks for itself. The emails, the drafts, they're all dated before I even pitched to Derek. He didn't collaborate on this, he took it and put his name on it. And the contract, I pointed to the page in her hands. He signed it in my name without my knowledge. That's not collaboration. That's theft. Derek's jaw tightened, just for a second. But I saw it. Rachel looked at him, her expression still neutral. Derek, can you explain the contract? He leaned back, his smile returning, but it was strained. An oversight, he said. My assistant must have made a mistake with the paperwork. I never intended to misrepresent Sophie's role. It was a weak excuse, and I could tell Rachel wasn't buying it. She set the folder down and looked between us. I'll need to review this further, she said. We'll reconvene tomorrow. I left the meeting feeling drained, but oddly alive. I'd done it. I'd stood up to Derek, laid out the truth, and held my ground. James caught my eye as we left, giving me a small nod that felt like a lifeline. But Derek's smirk lingered in my mind, a reminder that this wasn't over. That night, I walked through Prospect Park, the leaves crunching under my feet. The air smelled of damp earth, and I let myself breathe, really breathe, for the first time in days. I thought about my dad again, his hands carving that wooden bird, his voice steady. Don't let him take what's yours. I wasn't letting Derek take this. Not my work, not my voice, not my future. The next morning, James called me before I even got to the office. Sophie, he said, his voice urgent. The client wants to meet you today. They've seen the evidence and they're not happy with Derek. This is your chance. My heart leapt, but fear followed close behind. A meeting with the client meant everything. The campaign, my career, my truth. I spent the morning preparing, my hands shaking as I reviewed my notes. By noon, I was in a conference room facing the silver-haired man from the original meeting. His name was Mr. Langley, and his eyes were kind but sharp, like he could see through any facade. Ms. Miller, he said, leaning forward, tell me about your campaign, from the beginning. I did. I walked him through every step, my voice steady, my passion for the work spilling out. I showed him the drafts, the data, the vision. He listened, nodding, asking questions that showed he understood. When I finished, he leaned back, a small smile on his face. This is impressive, he said, and it's clear this is your work. We're moving forward with the campaign, and we want you leading it, not Derek. I blinked, my breath catching. Thank you, I managed, my voice thick. That means everything. As I left the room, the city skyline glittered through the window, and I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was Sophie Miller and I was done hiding Dot. The elevator ride down from the client meeting felt like floating. My hands still trembled. But it wasn't fear anymore. It was something alive, something electric. Mr. Langley's words echoed in my head. Asterisk, we want you leading it. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not just as a worker bee, but as someone with a voice, a vision. I stepped out into the lobby, the marble floor reflecting the late afternoon light, and caught my reflection in the glass doors. My hair was pulled back, my glasses slightly crooked, but my eyes, they were different, brighter, stronger. I texted Carla as I walked out into the October chill, the city buzzing around me. Clients with me. They want me to lead the campaign. Her reply came in seconds, a string of exclamation points and heart emojis, followed by, asterisk, told you, Soph. You're a rock star. I smiled, tucking my phone into my coat pocket. The air smelled of roasted chestnuts from a street cart, and for a moment, I was a kid again, walking through a fall festival with my parents, my mom's scarf brushing my cheek as she handed me a paper bag of warm nuts. The memory stung, soft and sweet, a reminder of how far I'd come from that quiet girl who thought the world would always be kind. But the high didn't last. Back at the office, reality settled in like dust after a storm. James met me in the hallway, his face a mix of pride and caution. You did good with the client, he said, his voice low, but HR's still reviewing. Derek's not backing down, and he's got friends in high places. Be ready. I nodded, my stomach tightening. I'd won a battle, but the war wasn't over. Derek was still my boss, still the firm's golden boy, and I knew he'd fight to save face. I spent the rest of the day at my desk trying to focus on work, but jumping every time my email pinged. By the time I left, the sky was bruising purple, and I felt the weight of it all pressing down again. That night, I sat in my apartment, a glass of cheap red wine in my hand, the contract still spread out on the coffee table. I kept replaying the HR meeting, Derek's smooth lies, the way his eyes had locked onto mine like a challenge. I hated how he made me doubt myself, even now. I thought about calling my mom, but it was late and I didn't want to worry her. Instead, I pulled out an old journal from college, one I'd filled with half-baked ideas and dreams. Flipping through it, I found a page where I'd written, asterisk, I want to change the world, one story at a time. It was cheesy, but it reminded me why I'd gotten into marketing, not for awards or corner offices, but to connect, to create, to make something that mattered. The next morning, I woke to an email from Rachel. The subject line was simple. Asterisk follow-up meeting, 2 p.m. Asterisk. My heart sank. I'd hoped for a decision, not another round of questions. I spent the morning preparing, rereading my evidence, practicing my responses. Carla stopped by my desk at noon, her usual bravado softened by worry. You've got this, she said, squeezing my shoulder. Just tell the truth. That's all you need. I wanted to believe her, but as I walked into Rachel's office that afternoon, my nerves were raw. Rachel was there, her expression as neutral as ever, and James sat to her left, his hands folded. Derek was already seated, his suit impeccable, his smile ablaze. I took the chair across from him, my folder in my lap, and tried to breathe. Rachel started by summarizing the situation, her voice clinical. We've reviewed the evidence, spoken to the client, and considered both accounts. Sophie, your documentation is thorough, and the client's confirmation supports your claim. Derek, your explanation about the contract being a mistake doesn't align with the timeline or the emails. Derek's smile didn't falter, but I saw his hands tighten on the armrests. I understand how this looks, he said, his voice smooth, but I've always acted in the firm's best interests. Sophie's talented, but she's young, eager to prove herself. I guided her idea, shaped it. The credit belongs to the team. I felt my face heat, anger bubbling up. Asterisk guided, shaped? He'd done nothing but steal. I opened my mouth to speak, but Rachel raised a hand. We've heard enough, she said. The evidence is clear. Derek, you misrepresented Sophie's work and used her name on a contract without her consent. That's a serious breach of ethics. The room went still. Derek's smile finally cracked, his eyes narrowing. You're taking her word over mine? He said, his tone sharp. I've been with this firm for 15 years. I've brought in millions in revenue. Rachel didn't flinch. This isn't about revenue, it's about integrity. We're recommending disciplinary action, effective immediately. You'll be suspended pending a full investigation. I sat there, stunned, as the words sank in. Suspended. It wasn't a firing, but it was a blow. One Derek couldn't charm his way out of. He stood, his movements stiff, and for the first time he looked at me with something like hatred. "You think this is over?" he said, his voice low, before walking out. James caught my eye, his nod subtle but steady. Rachel turned to me. "Sophie, the client has requested you lead the campaign, and we're promoting you to senior strategist. Your work deserves recognition." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Relief washed over me, but it was tangled with something else. Sadness, maybe, or the weight of what it had taken to get here. As I left the office, the city felt quieter, the skyline softened by a thin layer of clouds. I walked to the subway, my bag heavy with the folder I no longer needed to clutch like a shield dot. That night, I called my mom. Her voice was warm, a little hoarse from a cold she'd been fighting. "I'm proud of you, Sophie," she said when I told her everything. "Not just for winning, but for fighting. That's who you are." I cried then, the kind of tears that come from deep inside, where the hurt and the hope live together. I thought about Derek, his smirk, his lies, and how close I'd come to letting him win. But I hadn't. I'd stood firm, like my mom always said, and I'd taken back what was mine. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I threw myself into the campaign, working late nights but loving every minute. The client was thrilled, and the firm started buzzing with my name, not Derek's. I moved into a new office, small but with a window that let in the morning light. Carla brought me a plant as a housewarming gift. A sturdy little succulent she said was impossible to kill. We laughed, and for the first time in months, it felt easy. Derek's suspension became permanent, though I didn't hear the details. I saw him one last time clearing out his office, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder. He didn't look at me, and I didn't need him to. I'd already moved on. But the victory wasn't as sweet as I'd expected. It was quieter, more bittersweet, like the taste of coffee gone cold. I'd won, but I'd lost something too. The naive belief that hard work alone was enough, that fairness was guaranteed. I thought about my dad's words again about not letting people take what's yours. He was right, but he hadn't warned me how much it would cost to hold on. One evening, I sat on my fire escape, a blanket around my shoulders, watching the city pulse below. The air smelled of rain, and I let myself feel it all, the pride, the pain, the growth. I wasn't the same Sophie who'd walked into that conference room months ago, invisible and afraid. I was someone new, someone who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to fight for it. I thought about the campaign, now live, its ads lighting up screens across the city. My name was on it, not as a footnote, but as the lead. And as I looked out at the skyline, I realized something. This wasn't the end. It was a beginning. A chance to keep creating, keep fighting, keep telling stories that mattered. I went back inside, the journal from college still open on my table. I picked up a pen and wrote a new line to her. "I'm not hiding anymore." Then I closed it, turned off the light, and let the city's hum carry me into tomorrow. The weeks that followed felt like stepping into a new skin. My new office, with its sliver of a view over Manhattan's jagged skyline, became a sanctuary. I'd arrive early before the city fully woke and sit at my desk with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint the buildings gold. The succulent Carla gave me sat on the windowsill, its leaves plump and stubborn, a quiet reminder that I could thrive too. My promotion to senior strategist came with a heavier workload, but I welcomed it. The campaign was mine now, and every email from the client, every tweak to the ad copy, felt like a brushstroke on a canvas I'd fought to claim. But even in the glow of victory, there were shadows. I'd catch myself looking over my shoulder, half expecting Derek to appear in a meeting or lean over my desk with that smirk. His absence left a strange void, not because I missed him, but because his presence had been a constant pressure, a reminder to stay small. Without it, I was learning to stretch, to take up space, but it wasn't easy. I'd spent so long being the quiet one, the dependable one, that being seen felt like standing on a stage with no script. Carla noticed. We'd grab lunch at the deli across the street, splitting a turkey sandwich and stealing each other's fries. One day, as we sat at a wobbly table by the window, she tilted her head, studying me. "You're different, Soph," she said, popping a fry into her mouth. "Not just the fancy title, you're, I don't know, taller or something." I laughed, brushing crumbs off my sweater. "Taller? I'm still 5'4", Carla." "You know what I mean," she said, her eyes soft but serious. "You're not hiding anymore. It's good to see." Her words stayed with me, like a melody you hum without realizing. I thought about them that evening as I walked home, the city alive with the clatter of construction and the hum of taxis. I stopped at a corner market, the kind with buckets of flowers spilling onto the sidewalk. The roses smelled like my mom's garden, and I bought a small bunch, their petals soft against my fingers. At home, I put them in a mason jar on my kitchen counter, their red a bright spot against the peeling paint. It was a small thing, but it felt like a promise to myself to keep growing, to keep choosing color over gray dot work became my anchor. The campaign was rolling out across digital platforms, and the client's enthusiasm was contagious. Mr. Langley called me directly now, his voice warm but direct, asking for updates or tossing out ideas. I'd sit in my office, my glasses slipping down my nose, and talk him through analytics or creative tweaks, my confidence growing with every call. The firm noticed too. Colleagues who'd barely known my name started stopping by my office, asking for input or congratulating me on the campaign's early success. It was flattering, but it also made me uneasy. I wasn't used to the spotlight, and part of me still braced for it to burn. One morning, as I was reviewing ad metrics, Rachel emailed me. The subject line was blank, which made my stomach twist. I opened it, expecting bad news, but it was an invitation to a company wide meeting. We'd like you to present the campaign's progress, she wrote. Asterisk, your leadership has been exemplary. I stared at the screen, my coffee going cold. Presenting to the entire firm, partners, executives, everyone, wasn't just a pat on the back. It was a test. I spent the next few days preparing, my apartment a mess of notes and mock ups. I practiced in front of my bathroom mirror, my reflection looking more nervous than I wanted to admit. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, the city's hum seeping through the window, and thought about a moment from my childhood. I was 9, standing in my school's auditorium, about to recite a poem for a talent show. My knees shook, and I'd forgotten the first line, but my mom was in the front row, her smile steady. Just breathe, Sophie, she'd whispered before I went on. The words will come. They had, and the applause afterward had felt like flying. I clung to that memory now, hoping it would carry me through. The meeting was in the firm's largest conference room, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Hudson. I stood at the front, my slides projected behind me, facing a sea of faces, some familiar, some strangers. James was in the second row, his nod a quiet anchor. Rachel sat near the front, her expression unreadable. I adjusted my glasses, took a breath, and began. I walked them through the campaign from the initial concept to the latest metrics. I showed them the ads, the data, the client's feedback. My voice was steady, stronger than I'd expected, and as I spoke, I felt the room shift. People leaned forward, nodded, scribbled notes. I wasn't just presenting, I was telling a story, my story, woven into every slide. When I finished, the applause was warm, not polite, and I felt that old auditorium thrill again, but deeper, hard dash earned, dot afterward comma. James found me in the hallway, a rare smile on his face. You owned that room, Sophie, he said. I knew you had it in you. I smiled back, my chest tight with gratitude. Thank you, I said, for believing in me when I didn't. He waved it off, but his eyes were kind. You did the work. I just helped clear the path. That night, I celebrated with Carla at a dive bar in the East Village, the kind with sticky floors and a jukebox that only played Springsteen. We drank cheap beer and laughed until my sides hurt, her stories about bad dates and office gossip a welcome escape. But as I walked home, the city quiet under a rare starry sky, I felt a pang of something I couldn't name. Not sadness exactly, but a kind of ache. I'd won, but the fight had left scars, doubts I hadn't had before, a wariness that lingered like a bruised dot. The campaign's success kept building. Articles mentioned it, industry blogs praised it, and my name started appearing in places I never expected. One evening, I got an email from a rival firm hinting at a job offer. I read it twice, my heart racing, then set it aside. I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. This place, with all its flaws, was where I'd found my voice. I wanted to stay, to keep building, to prove I could do more than survive. But there was one last twist, one I hadn't seen coming. A week later, I was in my office reviewing a new client brief when Rachel knocked on my door. She looked tired, her usual polish softened by something human. Can we talk? She said, closing the door behind her. I nodded, bracing myself. She sat across from me, her hands folded. I owe you an apology, she said. When you first came to me about Derek, I hesitated. I knew he was trouble, but I let politics cloud my judgment. You deserved better. I blinked, caught off guard. I. Thank you, I said, my voice soft. I know it wasn't easy. She shook her head. It shouldn't have been hard. You had the truth, and I should have acted faster. I'm stepping down as HR director at the end of the month. I recommended you for a leadership training program the firm's launching. I think you'd be a natural. I stared at her, my mind reeling. A leadership program wasn't just a pat on the back. It was a door to something bigger, a chance to shape the firm, not just survive it. I don't know what to say, I admitted. Say yes, she said, a small smile breaking through. You've earned it. I did say yes later after the shock wore off. But that night, as I sat on my fire escape, the city sprawling below, I let myself feel the weight of it all, the betrayal, the fight, the victory. They'd changed me, carved new lines in my heart. I thought about my parents, their quiet strength, their belief in me. I thought about the girl I'd been, hiding in the background, and the woman I was becoming, unafraid to stand tall. The roses on my counter were starting to wilt, their petals curling at the edges. I touched one, its softness a reminder of how fragile beauty could be. But I didn't throw them out. I let them stay, a testament to the moment I'd chosen them, to the life I was choosing now. I went back inside, the journal from college open on my table. I hadn't written in it since that night, but I picked up the pen, my hand steady. I'm building something new, I wrote. Asterisk, and it's mine. Then I closed the book, turned off the light, and let the city carry me forward, one step at a time. The leadership training program started in November, just as the city began to glitter with early holiday lights. I'd walk to the office through streets lined with wreaths and twinkling storefronts, my breath fogging in the cold, feeling like I was stepping into a new chapter. The program was intense. 2 evenings a week, plus weekend seminars, all designed to mold us into the firm's next wave of executives. I was one of 12 participants, the youngest by a decade, and the only woman in the first cohort. It was daunting, but I'd fought too hard to let imposter syndrome win. The sessions were held in a sleek conference center downtown with polished wood tables and windows that framed the city like a painting. Our instructor, a former CEO named Ellen, was a force, sharp-witted, no nonsense, but warm in a way that made you want to impress her. She'd start each session with a question, something deceptively simple like, "What's the cost of your silence?" or "Who do you trust to tell you the truth?" I'd sit there, my notebook open, scribbling thoughts that felt too raw to share, but Ellen had a way of pulling answers out of you, not with pressure, but with patience. Like she knew you'd find your way if she gave you room. One evening, she asked us to write about a moment we'd failed ourselves. The room went quiet, pens scratching, faces tight with memory. I stared at my page, the blankness mocking me. Then I started writing about Derek. Not the theft, not the fight, but the months before when I'd let him dismiss my ideas, when I'd stayed silent because I thought it was safer. I wrote about the conference room that day, watching him take my work, my heart sinking but my voice locked away. The words poured out, messy and honest, and when Ellen called on me to share, I hesitated. My hands shook as I read, but my voice held steady, and when I finished, the room was still. Ellen nodded, her eyes kind. That's where leadership begins, she said, in owning your mistakes and choosing differently. Her words stuck with me, like a pebble in my shoe, nudging me every time I doubted myself. I was learning to speak up in meetings, to challenge ideas without apologizing, to trust my instincts. It wasn't easy. I'd catch myself slipping back into old habits, nodding too quickly, softening my opinions. But I'd remember Ellen's voice, my mom's smile, my dad's steady hands, and I'd try again. Work was busier than ever. The campaign was a hit, with metrics exceeding projections and the client singing our praises. I was leading a small team now, 3 junior strategists who looked at me with a mix of awe and expectation. I tried to be the kind of leader I'd wanted, fair, clear, encouraging, but I was still finding my footing. One of them, a quiet guy named Sam, reminded me of myself a few years ago, always working late, hesitant to share his ideas. I'd pull him aside after meetings, ask for his thoughts, and watch his confidence grow. It felt good, like paying forward the belief James and Carla had given me. But the firm wasn't a fairy tale. Derek's exit had left ripples, whispers in the break room, sidelong glances from his old allies. Some saw me as a hero, others as a troublemaker. I overheard a senior account manager mutter something about ambitious kids one day, and it stung, but I brushed it off. I'd earned my place, and I wasn't going to shrink to make anyone comfortable. Carla was my rock through it all. We'd meet for coffee on weekends, huddled in a cozy shop near her apartment, the kind with mismatched mugs and a cat that slept on the counter. She'd tease me about my new boss lady vibe, but her pride was real. One Saturday, as we sipped lattes and watched snow dust the street, she leaned forward, her eyes serious. You ever think about what's next, Soph? Like beyond the firm? I stirred my coffee, the spoon clinking against the mug. Sometimes, I admitted, that rival firm emailed again. Better pay, bigger role. But I'm not ready to leave. Not after everything. She nodded, her red lipstick bright against the gray day. You'll know when it's time, just don't stay out of loyalty. You owe them your work, not your life. Her words lingered, like the smell of coffee on my coat as I walked home. I thought about my mom's bookstore, how she'd poured her heart into it, but knew when to let go. I wasn't there yet, but the idea of something new, a fresh start, a bigger canvas, sparked a quiet excitement I hadn't felt in a while. The holidays came, and I went home to see my mom. The drive upstate was long, the roads lined with bare trees and patches of snow. Her house smelled of cinnamon and pine, the same as always, and when she hugged me, I held on a little longer. We spent the weekend baking cookies, watching old movies, talking about everything and nothing. I told her about the leadership program, the campaign, Rachel's apology. She listened, her eyes bright, and when I finished, she took my hand. You're not just fighting for yourself, Sophie, she said. You're showing other girls they can fight too. Her words hit deep, and I carried them back to the city like a treasure. I thought about them during the leadership program's final seminar when Ellen asked us to define our purpose. I wrote about creating space for others, about building teams where ideas could thrive, no matter who they came from. When I shared it, Ellen smiled, a rare, full smile. That's not just leadership, she said. That's legacy. The program ended with a small ceremony. Just us and a few execs in a conference room strung with fairy lights. I got a certificate, a handshake, and a quiet sense of pride. James was there, clapping as I walked to the front, and afterward he pulled me aside. You're going places, Sophie, he said. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I smiled, my throat tight. I won't, I said. And I meant it. Back at work, the new year brought new challenges. The firm landed a major client, and I was tapped to lead the pitch. It was a high-stakes project, the kind that could make or break a career. I dove in, my team behind me, and felt the old thrill of creation. The late nights, the brainstorming, the moment when an idea clicked. But this time, I wasn't alone. I had Sam, pushing bold concepts, Carla sneaking me coffee and pep talks, James offering quiet guidance. I was building something, not just for myself, but with others, and it felt right. One evening, as I left the office, I passed the conference room where it all began. The lights were off, the table empty, but I could still see Derek standing there, my work glowing behind him. I paused, my reflection faint in the glass door. The pain was still there, a quiet ache, but it was softer now, woven into the strength I'd found. I thought about my dad's wooden bird, my mom's bookstore, the roses on my counter. They were all part of me, the hurt and the hope, the battles and the beauty. I stepped outside, the city alive with possibility. The air was sharp, carrying the promise of snow, and I tilted my head back, letting the first flakes kiss my face. I wasn't the girl who'd sat silent in that room, nor was I the woman who'd fought to be heard. I was something new, still forming, still growing. And as I walked into the night, my scarf tight against the wind, I knew I was ready for whatever came next. My apartment was warm when I got home, the succulent on my windowsill catching the glow of a street lamp. I opened my journal, the pages worn but waiting. I wrote one line. I'm not just surviving, I'm building. Then I set the pen down, the city's heartbeat steady outside, and let myself rest. Knowing tomorrow was mine to shape. The new client pitch consumed my days, a whirlwind of late nights and endless revisions. The project was for a tech startup, a company poised to disrupt the industry with a new app. And they wanted a campaign that was bold, fresh, human. It was the kind of challenge I lived for, the kind that made my pulse quicken as I sketched ideas on napkins or typed furiously in the glow of my laptop. My team, Sam, a fiery copywriter named Mia, and a data analyst named Raj, threw themselves into it, their energy contagious. We'd crowd around my office table, coffee cups piling up, tossing out concepts and laughing at the absurd ones. It felt like a family, small and scrappy, building something together, but the pressure was real. This wasn't just a campaign, it was a chance to cement my place at the firm, to prove my promotion wasn't a fluke. I'd catch James watching me in meetings, his expression unreadable, and wonder if he was measuring me against the expectations he'd helped create. I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the work, but it lingered like a shadow, nudging me to prove myself again and again. One evening, as I was tweaking a slide deck, Sam knocked on my doorframe, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Got a sec? He said, his voice hesitant. I pushed my glasses up, nodding. Always, what's up? He shifted, looking younger than his 25 years. I had an idea for the pitch, but it's kind of out there. I didn't want to bring it up in the group. I leaned back, smiling to put him at ease. Out there's good. Let's hear it. He pulled out his laptop, showing me a concept for an interactive ad, one that let users shape the story through their choices. It was ambitious, risky, but brilliant. I saw the spark in his eyes, the same one I'd felt when I first pitched my campaign to Derek. This is great, Sam, I said. We're using it. You present it tomorrow. His face lit up, then faltered. Me? I don't know if I'm ready. You are, I said. Thinking of how I'd felt in that conference room, my voice locked away. I'll be right there with you. Just tell the story. He nodded, a shy grin breaking through, and I felt a quiet pride, not just in him, but in myself. I was learning to lift others up, to create space for their voices. It was what I'd promised myself in the leadership program, what I'd written in my journal, a legacy, not just a career. The pitch was set for a Friday in a sleek boardroom at the client's headquarters. I wore my navy blazer, the one that had carried me through the HR meeting, and stood at the front with my team, my hands steady despite the nerves. The client's CEO, a woman with sharp eyes and a warm smile, listened as I walked through the campaign, weaving data with storytelling. When Sam presented his interactive ad, his voice shook at first, but he found his rhythm, and I saw the CEO lean forward, intrigued. By the end, the room was alive with questions, not skeptical but excited, and I knew we'd nailed it. They called the next day to greenlight the campaign, with Sam's concept as the centerpiece. My team celebrated with pizza in my office, the cardboard boxes greasy and the laughter loud. Raj toasted me with a soda can, calling me the boss who doesn't suck, and I laughed, my chest warm. But as I looked at them, Sam beaming, Mia sketching new ideas on a napkin, Raj crunching numbers on his phone, I felt something deeper. This was what I'd fought for, not just my own voice, but theirs, a team where ideas could breathe. That night, I walked through Central Park, the air crisp and the trees bare against the skyline. The city felt softer, its edges blurred by the glow of streetlights. I stopped by the Bethesda fountain, its water catching the moonlight, and thought about a summer day when I was 16, sitting there with my dad. He'd bought me an ice cream, the kind that melted faster than you could eat it, and told me stories about his first job, fixing cars in a dusty garage. Work's not just about money, Sophie, he'd said, wiping chocolate off my chin. It's about who you become. I'd rolled my eyes then, but now I understood. I was becoming someone who fought, who built, who stayed. The rival firm's offer came up again, this time in a phone call. The recruiter was smooth, promising a corner office, a bigger budget, a chance to lead at a higher level. I listened, my fingers tracing the edge of my coffee mug, and felt the pull of possibility. But when I hung up, I looked around my apartment, the succulent, the journal, the faded photo of my mom's bookstore, and knew I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. The firm was flawed, but it was where I'd grown, where I'd learned to stand tall. I wanted to keep shaping it, to make it better for the next Sophie, the next Sam. Winter turned to spring, and the campaign launched to rave reviews. Billboards lit up Times Square, my team's work glowing for the world to see. I'd walk past them on my way to work, my name in the credits, and feel a quiet satisfaction, not loud or flashy, but steady, like a heartbeat. The firm gave me a raise, a bigger office, and a seat at the strategy table. I took it all not with pride, but with purpose. Knowing each step was a chance to do more. One morning, I got an email from Ellen, my leadership instructor. She was starting a mentorship program for young women in marketing and wanted me to speak at the kickoff. Asterisk. Your story matters, she wrote. Asterisk, share it. I stared at the screen, my throat tight. I thought about the girl I'd been, invisible and afraid, and the woman I was now, still learning but unafraid to try. I typed back, I'm in, and felt the weight of those words, not as a burden, but as a gift. The mentorship event was in a small venue downtown, with folding chairs and a podium that wobbled. I stood there facing a room of young women, their eyes bright with ambition and uncertainty. I told them about the campaign, about Derek, about the fight to be heard. I told them about my mom's bookstore, my dad's wooden bird, the roses that wilted but stayed. My voice broke once when I talked about standing up to Derek, but I kept going. And when I finished, the applause was soft but real, like a shared breath. Afterward, a girl approached me, her hair in a messy bun, her notebook clutched tight. I'm scared I'll never be enough, she said, her voice barely a whisper. How do you keep going? I looked at her, seeing myself at 22, and smiled. You're already enough, I said. The hard part is believing it. Just keep showing up, one step at a time. She nodded, her eyes shining, and I felt something settle in me, a piece of the puzzle clicking into place. This was why I'd fought, not just for me, but for her, for all of them. I walked home that night, the city alive with spring, cherry blossoms drifting like snow. My apartment was quiet, the journal open on my table. I didn't write anything new. I didn't need to. The story was still unfolding, written in every choice, every step, every voice I helped lift. I sat on my fire escape, a blanket around my shoulders, the city's pulse steady below. The succulent on my windowsill caught the light, stubborn and green, and I smiled. I wasn't done growing, not by a long shot. But for now, I was exactly where I needed to be, rooted, reaching, ready for whatever came next. Spring in New York always felt like a promise kept, the city shedding its gray winter skin for bursts of color. Tulips in planters, green creeping up the trees, sunlight spilling over the pavement. I'd walk to work with my coat unbuttoned, the air carrying hints of street cart pretzels and blooming magnolias. My new office, with its wider window, let in the season's glow, and I'd catch myself staring out at the skyline, my mind drifting between campaign deadlines and the quiet realization that I was building a life I hadn't dared dream of a year ago. The tech startup campaign was a runaway success, its ads trending online and sparking buzz at industry conferences. My team was riding high, their confidence growing with every win. Sam, especially, had come into his own, pitching ideas with a boldness that made me proud. Mia's sharp wit kept our creative sessions lively, and Raj's knack for uncovering data insights was like finding gold in a spreadsheet. We'd stay late some nights, not out of obligation, but because we loved it, the hum of collaboration filling the room like music. I'd look at them and think of my mom's words. You're showing other girls they can fight too. I wasn't just leading a team, I was nurturing a space where they could shine. But success didn't erase the doubts. I'd lie awake some nights, the city's hum a faint pulse through my window, wondering if I was enough for this role, if I could keep proving myself. The firm was a machine, always hungry for more. More wins, more clients, more prestige. I felt its weight not as a burden, but as a challenge, a call to keep growing. I'd think of Ellen's question from the leadership program. What's the cost of your silence? I'd paid that cost once with Derek, and I wasn't going back. One morning, as I was reviewing a new client brief, James stopped by my office. He leaned against the door frame, his tie slightly loosened, a rare casualness in his posture. Got a minute? He said, his voice warm. I pushed my laptop aside, nodding. For you? Always. He smiled, stepping inside and closing the door. The partners are talking about you, Sophie. Your work's getting noticed, not just here, but industry-wide. There's a conference in Chicago next month, big players, big stage. They want you to keynote. I blinked, my heart stuttering. Keynote? Me? You, he said, his eyes steady. You've got a story to tell, your campaign, your leadership, what you've overcome. It's not just about the work, it's about who you are. I swallowed, my mind racing. A keynote was a leap, far beyond presenting to the firm or a client. It was a platform, a chance to shape the conversation, but also a spotlight that could expose every flaw. I don't know if I'm ready, I admitted, my voice quieter than I meant. James tilted his head, studying me. You're ready? You've been ready since you walked into my office with that folder. The question is, do you believe it? His words hit like a memory, sharp and clear. I thought of my dad, sitting on our porch, his hands carving that wooden bird. Asterisk people will try to take what's yours. Don't let 'em. I thought of my mom, her bookstore shelves lined with stories, her voice steady as she fought to keep it alive. They'd believed in me, and so had James, Carla, Ellen. Maybe it was time I believed in myself. I'll do it, I said, my voice firm. Thank you, James. He nodded, a small smile breaking through. Good. I'll send you the details. And Sophie? Don't hold back. Tell the whole story. The Chicago conference loomed like a mountain, its shadow growing as the weeks passed. I spent evenings drafting my speech, my apartment a mess of crumpled notes and half-empty coffee mugs. I wanted to talk about the campaign, yes, but also about the fight behind it, the betrayal, the evidence, the choice to stand up. I wanted to honor the people who'd carried me through, from my parents to my team. Most of all, I wanted to reach the Sophies in the audience, the ones who felt invisible, and tell them they could be seen. Carla helped me practice, sitting cross-legged on my couch, her red lipstick bright against the dim light. She'd interrupt me mid-sentence, shouting, "Louder, Soph! Own it!" Or, "That part's too stiff. Make it real." Her feedback was brutal but loving, and by the time I boarded the plane to Chicago, I felt ready. Not fearless, but grounded. Like I could weather whatever came. The conference was a blur of polished suits and buzzing lobbies, the air thick with ambition. I stood backstage, my blazer crisp, my glasses slipping slightly, listening to the hum of the crowd. My speech was folded in my pocket, but I didn't need it. The words were in me, woven from every moment that had brought me here. When the MC called my name, I took a breath, picturing my mom in the front row, her smile steady, and stepped into the light. I told my story. I talked about the campaign, its data and creativity, but also about Derek, the contract, the fight to reclaim my work. I shared the fear, the doubt, the quiet victories. I spoke about my team, about Sam's bold idea, about the power of lifting others up. My voice shook once when I mentioned my dad's advice, but I kept going, the words flowing like a river. The room was quiet, then alive with applause, and as I stepped off the stage, I felt lighter, like I'd left a piece of my past behind, afterward, comma. People crowded around, asking questions, shaking my hand. A young woman, maybe 25, pulled me aside, her eyes bright with tears. "I'm in a job where no one listens," she said. "Your story? It makes me think I can change that." I squeezed her hand, my throat tight. "You can," I said. "Start small, but start. You're stronger than you know." Flying back to New York, the city's lights sparkling below, I felt a quiet shift. The keynote wasn't just a speech, it was a marker, a moment that said I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was shaping, creating, leaving a mark. When I got home, I called my mom, her voice crackling through the phone. "I knew you'd shine, Sophie," she said, and I cried. Not from sadness, but from the fullness of it all. Back at the firm, life settled into a new rhythm. The startup campaign wrapped, and we landed another client, a nonprofit focused on education. I dove in, my team beside me, our ideas bolder than ever. But I was also looking ahead, dreaming bigger. The rival firm's offer was still there, a whisper of possibility, and I started to wonder if it was time for a new challenge, a chance to build something from the ground up. One evening, I sat on my fire escape, the city alive below, a glass of wine in my hand. The succulent on my windowsill was thriving, its leaves reaching for the light. I opened my journal, the pages worn but full, and wrote, "I'm not just fighting for me anymore. I'm fighting for what comes next." I thought of the girl at the conference, the ones in the mentorship program, the ones I hadn't met yet. My story wasn't just mine, it was theirs too. The roses I'd bought months ago were long gone, but their memory lingered, a reminder of the beauty in choosing yourself. I looked out at the skyline, its jagged edges soft in the dusk, and felt ready, not for an end, but for a beginning. The city hummed, steady and alive, and I knew, whatever came next, I'd face it with my voice, my strength, my heart. The nonprofit campaign felt different from the start, like a deep breath after a sprint. It wasn't about flashy ads or viral trends. It was about telling stories that mattered. Kids in underfunded schools, teachers stretching dollars to buy supplies, communities coming together to bridge the gaps. I'd sit with my team, poring over photos of classrooms, reading letters from students, and feel a pull in my chest, a reminder of why I'd fallen in love with this work. It was a chance to do good, not just do well, and I poured myself into it, determined to get it right. We worked out of my office, the walls now pinned with sketches and sticky notes, a whiteboard scrawled with taglines and data points. Sam was bolder now, tossing out ideas without hesitation, while Mia's sharp humor kept us grounded. Raj had a knack for finding stats that told a story, like how a single book could change a kid's trajectory. I'd watch them, their heads bent over laptops or laughing over takeout, and feel a quiet pride. This was what I'd fought for, a team that trusted each other, a space where creativity wasn't just allowed but celebrated. But the work wasn't easy. The nonprofit's budget was tight, their timeline brutal, and the stakes felt higher than any corporate pitch. I'd stay late, the city's glow filtering through my window, tweaking scripts or reviewing footage. One night, as I edited a video of a third grader reading her poem, her voice small but fierce, I thought of a moment from my childhood. I was 10, sitting in my mom's bookstore, a stack of novels beside me. She'd caught me crying over a story, my cheeks wet, and sat down, her hand warm on mine. Stories can break your heart, Sophie, she'd said, but they can also build you up. That girl's poem was building me up now, reminding me why this campaign mattered. The rival firm's offer kept circling, a quiet hum in the back of my mind. They'd emailed again, this time with specifics: a director role, a team of my own, a chance to shape their creative vision. I'd read it on my phone, standing in line for coffee, the barista's shout cutting through my thoughts. It was tempting, not just for the title or the pay, but for the fresh start, a canvas unmarred by the scars of my fight with Derek. But every time I considered it, I'd look at my team, my office, the city outside, and feel a tug to stay. This was where I'd grown, where I'd learned to stand tall. Leaving felt like abandoning a piece of myself. Carla sensed my restlessness. We met for drinks one evening at a rooftop bar with a view of the Empire State Building, its spire cutting through the dusk. She leaned back in her chair, her cocktail catching the light, and fixed me with a look. "You're thinking about that other job, aren't you?" she said, her voice teasing but sharp. I sipped my wine, the glass cool against my fingers. "Maybe," I admitted. "It's a big opportunity, but I don't know if I'm ready to leave." She tilted her head, studying me. "You've outgrown this place, Soph. Not the work, but the baggage. You fought for your spot and you won. Now you get to decide what's next. Don't stay because it's safe." Her words stung. Not because they were harsh, but because they were true. I'd been holding onto the firm like a lifeline, afraid to let go after everything I'd been through. But maybe letting go wasn't losing. It was choosing. I thought of my dad, his hands steady as he fixed a car, his voice calm. "Work's about who you become." I was still becoming, and maybe the next step was somewhere new. The nonprofit campaign launched in June, a quiet rollout that felt more like a whisper than a shout. We'd built a series of short films, each one centered on a student or teacher, their stories raw and real. The premiere was at a community center in Brooklyn, a low brick building with folding chairs and a projector that flickered. I stood at the back, my blazer swapped for a sweater, watching the audience, parents, kids, donors, lean forward, some wiping tears, others nodding. When the lights came up, the applause was soft but steady, like a heartbeat, and I felt a lump in my throat. This was what I'd wanted all along, to create something that moved people, that lasted. The client was thrilled, and the firm took notice. James called me into his office the next day, his smile rare but genuine. "You're making waves, Sophie," he said, leaning back in his chair. "The partners are talking about a new division, focused on social impact. We'd want you to lead it." I blinked, caught off guard. A division was huge, bigger than a campaign, bigger than a keynote. It was a chance to shape the firm's future, to build something lasting. "I'm honored," I said, my voice steady. "Can I think it over?" He nodded, his eyes kind. "Take your time. But know this. You're ready for it." I left his office in a daze, the city's hum swallowing me as I stepped outside. A new division was a dream, a chance to merge my passion with my skills, to make the firm a place where people like Sam or Mia could thrive. But the rival firm's offer was still there, a different kind of dream. Freedom, a fresh start, a chance to lead without the weight of my past. I felt torn. Not between good and bad, but between two versions of myself, both true, both possible. That night, I called my mom. Her voice was warm, a little tired from a long day at the community center where she volunteered. I told her about the division, the rival offer, the pull in my chest. She listened the way she always did, letting me spill until I ran out of words. You've got a big heart, Sophie, she said finally, and a big mind. Whatever you choose, it'll be right because you're choosing it. Her words settled me, like a hand on my shoulder. I thought of her bookstore, the way she'd fought for it but known when to let go. I thought of my dad, his wooden bird, a reminder to hold tight to what mattered. I wasn't sure what I'd choose, but I knew I'd do it with my eyes open, my heart full. The next few weeks were a blur of work and reflection. The nonprofit campaign gained traction, with local news picking up the stories and donors stepping up. My team was already brainstorming the next phase, their energy infectious. I'd watch them, laughing over lunch or debating taglines, and feel a pang of loyalty, not to the firm, but to them. They were my people, my proof that I'd built something real. One evening, I sat on my fire escape, the city sprawling below, its lights a map of possibility. The succulent on my windowsill was bigger now, its leaves stretching toward the sky. I opened my journal, the pages worn but waiting, and wrote, I'm choosing me wherever that leads. It wasn't an answer, not yet, but it was a start. I thought of the girl I'd been, silent in that conference room, and the woman I was now, speaking on stages, leading teams, shaping futures. The roses were gone, but their memory lingered, a reminder that beauty could fade, but strength endured. I looked out at the skyline, its edges sharp against the dusk, and felt a quiet certainty. The choice would come, and when it did, I'd be ready, not just to fight, but to build, to grow, to become. I went back inside, the journal heavy in my hands. The city hummed, steady and alive, and I let it carry me forward, one breath at a time, into a future I was ready to claim. I stood in my apartment, the journal heavy in my hands, the city's hum a steady pulse outside. The weight of the choice, stay with the firm and lead the new division or take the rival firm's offer, settled over me like a fog. It wasn't just about a job or a title. It was about who I wanted to be, what kind of life I wanted to build. I set the journal on the table, its pages curling at the edges, and looked at the succulent on my windowsill, its green leaves stubborn against the fading light. It had survived my neglect, my chaos, and it was still reaching for the sky. Maybe I could too. The next morning, I walked to work through a city waking up to summer, the air thick with the smell of hot pavement and blooming linden trees. My office was quiet, the whiteboard still scrawled with ideas from yesterday's meeting. I sat at my desk, my coffee steaming, and opened my laptop. The rival firm's offer was in my inbox, a PDF attachment with numbers that made my head spin. I read it again, then closed it and pulled up the nonprofit campaign's latest report. The numbers there were smaller, but the impact, schools getting books, kids writing poems, teachers smiling, felt bigger, heavier, real. I thought about my mom standing in her bookstore years ago, her hands dusty from shelving novels. She'd given it up when the fight became too much, but she'd never regretted it. It's not about holding on, Sophie, she'd told me once, her voice soft over a cup of chamomile tea. It's about knowing what you're fighting for. I was fighting for something now, not just my career, but a world where people like Sam, Mia, or that girl at the conference could stand up and be heard. And the question was where I could do that best. That afternoon, I met James for coffee at a diner near the office, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and waitresses who called you hun. He stirred sugar into his cup, his eyes crinkling with a smile. You've got a big decision coming, he said, cutting straight to it. The division's yours if you want it, but I hear you've got other offers. I nodded, my fingers tracing the rim of my mug. The rival firm's pushing hard. It's a fresh start, more control. But the division, it's a chance to make this place better, to build something that lasts. He leaned back, his gaze steady. You've already changed this place, Sophie. The way you lead, the way you fought. You've set a standard. Wherever you go, you'll do that. Just make sure it's a place that deserves you. His words stayed with me as I walked back to the office, the city's noise a familiar hum. I thought about Derek, how he'd shaped the firm's culture with his charm and his lies. He was gone now, but his shadow lingered in the whispers, the politics, the way some still looked at me like I'd broken an unspoken rule. I'd won, But the victory had cost me my trust, my innocence, the belief that hard work alone was enough. I didn't want to keep fighting that battle, not here. The nonprofit campaign wrapped up that week, its final event a small gathering at a school in the Bronx. The classroom smelled of chalk and new paint, the walls covered with student drawings. I stood at the back, watching kids read their poems, their voices shaky but proud. One girl, maybe 12, with braids and a gap-toothed smile, read about her dream to be a scientist. Her mom, sitting in the front row, wiped her eyes, and I felt my own throat tighten. This was why I'd stayed, why I'd fought. Not for awards or corner offices, but for moments like this, where a story could change a life. Afterward, the school principal shook my hand, her grip firm. Your team gave these kids a voice, she said. Thank you. I smiled, but inside I was reeling. I'd given them a voice, yes, but they'd given me something too. A reminder that my work could ripple, could matter beyond a paycheck or a byline. That night, I sat on my couch, the city's lights flickering through the window. I opened my journal, its pages a map of my journey, the fear, the fight, the growth. I wrote, asterisk, I want to build a world where no one has to fight to be seen. Then I closed it, my decision clear, like a stone settling in a stream. I wasn't staying. The division was a dream, but it was tied to a place that had hurt me, that might hurt others. The rival firm offered a chance to start fresh, to shape a culture from the ground up, to lead without looking over my shoulder. I called the rival firm the next morning, my voice steady as I accepted their offer. The recruiter sounded thrilled, promising to send the contract by noon. I hung up, my heart racing, and texted Carla. I'm leaving. Took the other job. Her reply was instant, a string of confetti emojis and asterisk, hell yes, Soph, time to fly. I laughed, the sound echoing in my quiet apartment, and felt a weight lift. Not all at once, but enough to breathe. Telling James was harder. I met him in his office, the photo of his kids still on the windowsill. He listened, his face calm but his eyes heavy. I'm not surprised, he said when I finished. You're too big for this place now, but you'll be missed. I swallowed, my throat tight. You made this possible, James. You believed in me when I didn't. He waved it off, but his smile was real. You did the work. Just keep doing it, wherever you go. The firm threw me a small goodbye party, a cake in the break room, and awkward speeches from colleagues. Sam gave me a card, his handwriting neat, thanking me for seeing him. Mia hugged me, her perfume sharp, and Raj promised to keep my succulent alive. I laughed, my eyes stinging, and realized how much I'd grown to love these people, this messy, imperfect place. But I was ready to go. My last day was quiet. I packed my office, the whiteboard now blank, the sticky notes folded into a box. I left the succulent on the windowsill, a gift for whoever came next. As I walked out, the city was golden, the late June light softening its edges. I passed the conference room where it all began, its glass doors reflecting the sunset. I didn't pause, didn't need to. That Sophie, the one who'd sat silent, invisible, was gone. I was someone new, forged in the fire of that betrayal, tempered by the fight to reclaim my voice. I heard about Derek a few weeks later through a friend of a friend. He'd landed at a smaller firm, a step down from his old glory. The industry whispered about his fall, clients wary, his charm tarnished by the truth. He wasn't ruined, not in the dramatic way people imagine, but he was diminished, his name no longer a golden ticket. I didn't feel triumph, not really. Just a quiet satisfaction, like closing a book you'd struggled to finish. He'd faced his consequences, not in a courtroom, but in the slow, steady way the world moves on without you. My new job started in July, a director role at a firm that felt alive with possibility. The office was smaller, less polished, but the team was hungry, their ideas sparking like fireflies. I dove in, building campaigns, mentoring new hires, shaping a culture where voices were heard. It wasn't perfect. There were late nights, tough calls, moments of doubt, but it was mine, a canvas I could paint with my own colors. I moved to a new apartment, a little bigger, with a balcony that caught the morning light. I bought another succulent, its leaves sharp and green, and placed it by the window next to a photo of my parents, their smiles frozen in time. I'd visit my mom every few months, driving upstate to her house, where we'd bake cookies and talk about everything work, love, the way the world kept turning. She'd hug me, her lavender scent the same as always, and say, You're doing it, Sophie. You're living. Carla stayed my anchor, our coffee dates a ritual. She'd tease me about my new big shot title, but her pride was real. Her laughter a reminder of the battles we'd shared. Sam emailed me sometimes, updating me on his projects, his confidence growing. I'd read his words, smiling, and think of the girl at the conference, the ones in the mentorship program, the ones I was mentoring now. My story wasn't just mine anymore, it was theirs. A thread in a tapestry bigger than me. One evening, I stood on my balcony, the city sprawling below, its lights a constellation of stories. I held my journal, its pages full but not finished, and thought of the roses I'd bought years ago, their petals soft and fleeting. I'd fought for my place, not with anger, but with quiet, steady strength. And I'd won, not just against Derek, but for myself, for the woman I'd become. I wasn't afraid anymore, not of failure, not of being seen. I was ready to keep building, to keep growing, to keep telling stories that mattered. I opened the journal, my pen steady, and wrote one last line. Asterisk, I am enough. Then I closed it, set it on the table, and stepped back outside. The city hummed, alive and endless, and I tilted my head to the sky, letting the stars whisper back. I was home. The courtroom smelled of old wood and stale coffee, the kind of scent that clings to places where lives are unraveled. I sat in the front row, my hands folded tightly in my lap, the weight of the last 6 months pressing against my chest. My navy blazer felt too stiff, like it belonged to someone else, someone who hadn't spent nights staring at bank statements, piecing together a betrayal I never saw coming. Across the room, Daniel stood with his lawyer, his tailored suit crisp, his smile just a touch too confident. He hadn't looked at me yet, but I could feel his presence like a storm cloud hovering too close. 3 years. That's how long I'd loved him. 3 years of mornings waking up to his laugh, of planning a future I thought we both wanted. The wedding was supposed to be next week. White lilies, a string quartet, my mother's pearl earrings tucked into a velvet box for the occasion. I could still picture the invitations, cream cardstock with gold lettering stacked neatly on my kitchen counter. Now they were in a dumpster somewhere, along with the life I'd imagined. It started with a notification. I was at my desk. The hum of the office around me. Phones ringing. My colleague Sarah laughing too loudly at a client call. My phone buzzed, and I glanced at it. Your account has been locked. Contact your bank for details. I frowned, assuming it was a glitch. I'd been meticulous with my finances, always had been. Growing up, my dad used to sit me down at the kitchen table, his glasses slipping down his nose, showing me how to balance a checkbook. Money is freedom, Sophie, he'd say. Don't let anyone take that from you. I wish I'd remembered that sooner. I called the bank, expecting a quick fix. Instead, the representative's voice was clipped. Professional. The primary account holder has restricted access. You'll need to speak with them. The primary account holder. Daniel. My fiancé. The man who'd promised to build a life with me, who'd kissed my forehead just that morning before leaving for work. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, the office noise fading into a dull roar. Why would he lock me out? When I got home that night, Daniel was in the kitchen, chopping onions for dinner. The apartment smelled of garlic and warmth, the kind of scene that used to make my heart ache with gratitude. He looked up, his green eyes crinkling at the corners. Hey, babe. Rough day? His voice was casual, but there was something off, a tightness I couldn't place. Why is my account locked? I asked, setting my bag down. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. I tucked them into my pockets. He didn't miss a beat. Oh, that? It's just a temporary thing. My business account got flagged for some weird activity, so I had to secure everything. It'll be fine in a couple of days. He turned back to the cutting board, the knife moving with precision. I wanted to believe him. I'd always believed him. When he told me he loved me after our first date, when he promised we'd travel the world together, when he slid that diamond ring onto my finger under a canopy of stars. Daniel had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, like his world revolved around you. But that night, as I watched him stir the sauce, I saw something else. A flicker of calculation in his eyes, like he was measuring my reaction. The next few days were a blur of unease. I tried to focus on work, pitching campaigns to clients, smiling through meetings, but my mind kept drifting back to that locked account. I checked our joint savings. Nothing. No alerts, no transactions, just a wall of restricted access. I called Daniel again, but his answers grew vaguer, his tone sharper. Sophia, you're overreacting. It's just paperwork. Can you trust me for once? Trust. That word stung. I'd trusted him with everything, my heart, my future, my money. We'd opened that joint account 2 years ago, pooling our savings for the wedding, for a house someday. I'd never questioned it, never thought to. But now, every time he deflected, a memory surfaced. My dad's voice, low and serious, warning me about giving too much of myself away. I started digging. Late at night, after Daniel was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, the glow of the screen casting shadows across the room. I logged into every account I could access, cross referencing statements, looking for anything out of place. At first, it was just small discrepancies, a withdrawal here, a transfer there. But then I found it, a private account in Daniel's name, one I'd never seen before. Thousands of dollars funneled from our joint savings sitting there, like a secret he thought I'd never uncover. Dot. My stomach churned. I thought of the mornings we'd spent planning the wedding, laughing over cake samples, arguing about whether to have a DJ or a band. Had it all been a lie? I closed the laptop and stared out the window at the city lights, my reflection faint against the glass. I remembered a moment from my childhood sitting on the porch with my mom, the air thick with the scent of jasmine. She'd been braiding my hair, her fingers gentle, and she'd said, Sophie, love is beautiful, but it's not enough on its own. You've got to protect your heart. I'd been too young to understand, but now, her words echoed like a warning I'd ignored. I didn't confront him right away. I couldn't. The wedding was 3 weeks away, and part of me still hoped I was wrong, that there was an explanation. But the more I watched him, the more I saw the cracks. He'd leave the room to take calls, his voice low and guarded. He'd snap at me over small things, leaving dishes in the sink, forgetting to pick up his dry cleaning. One night, he came home late, his tie loosened, his eyes distant. Work's been crazy, he said, but he wouldn't meet my gaze. I called Rebecca the next day. She'd been my best friend since college, the kind of person who could read you with one glance. She was also a lawyer, sharp and unflinching, and she'd been my rock through every heartbreak. We met at a cafe downtown, the kind with mismatched chairs and too loud music. I told her everything, the account, the transfers, the way Daniel's warmth had turned to ice. She listened, her coffee untouched, her eyes narrowing. Sophia, she said, leaning forward, this isn't just about money. He's planning something. You need to protect yourself. She was right. I knew it in my bones. That night, I went through his emails while he was in the shower, my heart pounding so loud I thought he'd hear it. I found a thread with his colleague, a man named Mark, talking about a plan to secure the funds after the wedding. The words blurred on the screen. Asterisk. She won't see it coming. It's clean. I felt like I'd been punched. The man I loved, the man I was about to marry, was plotting to take everything and leave me with nothing. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, Daniel's breathing steady beside me, and I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship. The first time he kissed me, under a street lamp after a rainy evening. The way he'd hold my hand during long drives, his thumb tracing circles on my skin. Had any of it been real? Or had I been a means to an end, a stepping stone for his greed? The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let him win. I called Rebecca and we got to work. She helped me pull every financial record, every transaction, every email that could prove what he was doing. It was exhausting, poring over numbers and dates, but it gave me purpose. I wasn't just fighting for my money. I was fighting for myself, for the woman I'd almost lost to his lies. Then, we found it. A video. Months ago, during an argument about his late nights at work, I'd left my phone, recording on the counter by mistake. I'd forgotten about it, buried in a folder of random clips. But there it was. Daniel's voice, sharp and unfiltered, saying, I'm not stupid, Sophia. I've got everything set up. If I need to walk away, I'm taking what's mine. It wasn't just an admission, it was a confession. My hands trembled as I played it again, the weight of his words sinking in. Rebecca's eyes lit up when I showed her. This is it, she said. This is how we nail him. The wedding was 2 weeks away, and Daniel was pushing harder. He started talking about a prenup, something he'd never mentioned before. It's just standard, he said one night, pouring wine like it was no big deal. Protects us both. But I saw the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes flicked to mine, testing me. I smiled, nodded, and said I'd think about it. Inside, I was screaming. A prenup wasn't about protection. It was his final move to ensure I had nothing. I canceled the wedding the next day. I didn't tell him. I called the venue, the florist, the caterer, and told them it was off. I packed a bag and moved into Rebecca's spare room, leaving a note on the counter. Asterisk, I know what you did. We're done. My hands shook as I wrote it, but for the first time in weeks, I felt free. Daniel called me nonstop. His voicemail's a mix of charm and desperation. Sophia, let's talk. You're making a mistake. I love you. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I had the evidence and I had Rebecca. We filed a lawsuit claiming fraud and breach of trust. The video was our ace, but the financial records were the foundation. Every transfer, every hidden account laid bare. The courtroom was quiet now, the judge flipping through papers. Daniel's lawyer was whispering to him, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. I stood, my legs steady, and handed the USB drive to the bailiff. Your Honor, I said, my voice clear, this is a recording of Daniel Green admitting his intent to defraud me. The room felt smaller as the video played. Daniel's voice filled the space, cold and calculated. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. I could feel his shock, his panic, like a wave crashing against me. The judge's face was unreadable, but I knew we'd won. The ruling came quickly, full access to our joint assets restored to me, plus a settlement for damages. Daniel's face was pale, his charm gone, replaced by something raw and defeated. I walked out into the sunlight, the air cool against my skin. My phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. I'm sorry, please don't do this. You'll regret it. I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. I didn't need his apologies. I didn't need him. I'd spent 3 years building a life with a man who didn't exist, but now I was building something new, something mine. As I drove away, the city stretched out before me, alive and buzzing. I thought of my dad, his hands worn from years of work, telling me to protect my freedom. I thought of my mom, her voice soft as she braided my hair. I thought of the woman I'd been, trusting and open, and the woman I was now, stronger, wiser, unafraid. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like it belonged to me. The highway stretched out like a ribbon under the late afternoon sun. The kind of light that paints everything gold and makes you feel realities feel sharp and fleeting. I had the windows down, the wind tugging at my hair, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The radio played some old country song, the kind my dad used to hum while tinkering with his car in the garage. I didn't sing along, but I let the melody fill the space, wrapping around me like a memory of simpler days. The city faded in my rearview mirror, and with it, the weight of Daniel's betrayal. Not entirely, pain like that doesn't vanish overnight, but enough that I could imagine a future where it didn't define me. I pulled into Rebecca's neighborhood, the streets lined with oak trees and modest houses, each with its own little quirks. A faded mailbox, a kid's bike tipped over in the grass. Her place was a cozy 2-bedroom with a front porch that creaked underfoot. She'd been letting me crash there since I left Daniel, and every night we'd sit on that porch with glasses of cheap wine, picking apart the mess of my life like it was a puzzle we could solve. I parked in her driveway, the gravel crunching under my tires, and sat there for a moment, staring at the dashboard. The victory in court was mine, but it didn't feel like a celebration earned. It felt like survival. Rebecca was in the kitchen when I walked in, chopping vegetables for dinner. The air smelled of olive oil and rosemary, and she looked up with a grin. Well, look at the conquering hero, she said, waving her knife like a conductor's baton. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she had a smear of tomato sauce on her cheek. How's it feel to be a free woman? I dropped my bag by the door and sank into a chair at the table. Free but broke, I said, half joking. The settlement would help, but untangling my finances from Daniel's was going to take time. And maybe a little lost. She set the knife down and wiped her hands on a dish towel, her expression softening. You're not lost, Sophia. You're just rerouting, like a GPS when you miss a turn. She slid a glass of wine across the table, her eyes steady on mine. You took him down today. That's not nothing. I took the glass, the cool stem grounding me. I know, but it's weird. I thought I'd feel triumphant, I guess, like I'd won some big prize. Instead, I just feel quiet, like I'm standing in the wreckage of my own life. Rebecca nodded, leaning against the counter. That's normal. You loved him, Soph. You built something with him, even if he was a snake. It's okay to mourn that, even while you're glad it's over. She paused, then added, You're allowed to feel both. Her words settled into me, heavy but true. I sipped the wine, letting it warm my throat. I thought about the night Daniel proposed, the way the stars had glittered over the lake, the way his hands had trembled as he slid the ring onto my finger. I'd been so sure that was the start of forever. Now forever was just me, this moment, this kitchen, this friend who'd carried me through the worst of it. And maybe that was enough for now. We ate dinner on the porch, the sky turning bruised purple as the sun dipped low. The crickets were out, their song a steady hum, and I could smell the neighbor's grill firing up. Rebecca told me about a case she was working on, some messy divorce that had her pulling late nights, but I could tell she was keeping things light for my sake. I appreciated it. After we cleared the plates, I lingered outside, staring at the stars peeking through the trees. A memory flickered. Me at 10, lying on a blanket in our backyard, my dad pointing out constellations. That's Orion, he'd said, his finger tracing the sky. He's a hunter, like you'll be one day, chasing what you want, never giving up. I smiled faintly. I'd chased justice, hadn't I? Maybe I was more like Orion than I thought. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and phone calls. I met with a financial advisor, a kind woman with graying hair and a no-nonsense attitude, who helped me sort through the mess Daniel had left. My marketing job kept me busy too. Client pitches, late-night emails, the kind of grind that felt both exhausting and familiar. I liked the routine, the way it anchored me, but there were moments, usually late at night, when the quiet crept in and I'd wonder how I'd missed the signs. Had I been too trusting, too eager to believe in love? Or was Daniel just that good at hiding who he was? One evening, I was at the office, the only one left on the floor. The city sparkled outside the window, all glass and steel, and I was finishing a presentation when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I'm sorry, Sophia. I messed up. Can we talk? My stomach twisted. Daniel. He must have gotten a new number after I blocked him. I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to reply to unleash every ounce of anger I'd bottled up. But then I remembered the courtroom, his voice on that video, the way he'd looked at me like I was nothing. I deleted the text and turned off my phone. He didn't get to have a piece of me anymore. I started therapy a month later. Rebecca had been nudging me toward it, and I finally gave in. My therapist, Ellen, had a warm voice and a knack for asking questions that cut straight to the bone. What does trust mean to you now? She asked during our second session, her pen poised over a notebook. I didn't have an answer, not really. Trust felt like a house I'd burned down, one I wasn't sure I could rebuild. But talking about it, about Daniel, about my dad's lessons, about the shame I carried for not seeing the truth, felt like clearing the ashes. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into a new campaign for a local nonprofit, designing ads that felt meaningful, like I was giving back something good to the world. My boss, Karen, noticed the shift. You're on fire lately, she said one afternoon, leaning against my cubicle. Whatever's fueling you, keep it up. I smiled, but I didn't tell her the fuel was survival, the need to prove I was more than the woman Daniel had tried to break. One Saturday, I drove to my parents' old house an hour outside the city. They'd moved to Florida a few years back, but I'd kept the keys, unable to let go of the place where I'd grown up. The yard was overgrown, the paint peeling, but it still smelled like home. Grass and dust and memories. I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing. In the living room, I found a photo on the mantle, me at 16, grinning in a graduation cap, my dad's arm around me. His smile was proud, fierce, like he knew I'd conquer the world. I traced the frame with my finger, tears prickling my eyes. I'm trying, Dad, I whispered. I'm trying. That night, I had a dream. I was back in the courtroom, but this time, Daniel wasn't there. It was just me, standing in the center, the judge's gavel replaced by my dad's old hammer, the one he used for fixing fences. He handed it to me and said, Build something new, Sophie. I woke up with my heart racing, the darkness soft around me. For the first time, I didn't feel haunted. I felt possible. Months passed, and the sharp edges of the betrayal began to dull. I wasn't healed, not completely, but I was moving. I started running in the mornings, the pavement steady under my feet, the sunrise painting the sky in pinks and oranges. I reconnected with old friends, laughed over coffee, let myself feel light again. Rebecca and I planned a trip to the coast, just the two of us, promising to eat too much seafood and forget the world for a weekend. One evening, as I was locking up the office, I got another text from Daniel. I'm leaving town. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I stood in the parking lot, the air cool, the city humming around me. I thought about replying, about closure, but then I realized I didn't need it. Closure wasn't his to give. I'd found it myself, in the quiet moments, in the strength I'd built from the ruins. I deleted the text and drove home, the stars bright above me. Rebecca was waiting on the porch, a bottle of wine already open. To new beginnings, she said, raising her glass. I clinked mine against hers, the sound sharp and clear. To new beginnings, I echoed, and for the first time, I believed it. The road ahead wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and I was ready to walk it. The ocean was a restless gray, waves crashing against the shore with a rhythm that felt both wild and comforting. Rebecca and I had driven to the coast for our weekend escape, the car packed with snacks and a playlist of songs we'd loved in college. The air smelled of salt and seaweed, and as I stood on the beach, my toes sinking into the cold sand, I felt a quiet shift inside me. The world was so much bigger than the pain I'd carried. Out here, with the horizon stretching endless before me, Daniel's betrayal seemed smaller. Like a chapter I'd finally closed. Rebecca was sprawled on a blanket a few feet away, her sunglasses perched on her nose, a paperback open in her lap. You gonna stand there all day, or are you joining me for some quality lounging? She called, her voice teasing. I laughed, the sound surprising me. It felt good, like a muscle I hadn't used in too long. I dropped onto the blanket beside her, the wind tugging at my hair, and stole a handful of her potato chips. This was a good idea, I said, leaning back on my elbows. The sky was a patchwork of clouds, the kind that looked like they couldn't decide whether to storm or clear. I needed this. She tilted her head, studying me. You're different, you know. Not like new person different, but lighter, like you're carrying less. I thought about that, crunching on a chip. She was right. The weight of the last year, the shock, the anger, the nights spent questioning myself, hadn't disappeared, but it had softened, like a bruise fading into skin. I wasn't the same Sophia who'd trusted Daniel blindly, who'd believed love was enough to fix everything, but I wasn't broken either. I was something new, something I was still figuring out. We spent the day wandering the little coastal town, popping into shops that smelled of lavender and old wood, eating fish tacos from a food truck parked near the pier. The guy running the truck, a man with a gray beard and a quick smile, told us stories about the town's history: shipwrecks, lost loves, ghosts that supposedly haunted the lighthouse. I listened, my hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee, and felt a strange kinship with those stories. They were about loss, yes, but also about resilience, about people who kept going even after the world tried to sink them. That night, we sat on the balcony of our rental, a weathered cottage with peeling paint and a view of the water. The air was chilly, and I pulled a blanket around my shoulders, the wool scratchy against my skin. Rebecca was scrolling through her phone, muttering about work emails, but I just stared at the ocean, the moonlight glinting off the waves. A memory flickered. Me and my mom, years ago, sitting on a beach like this one. I was maybe 12, my knees scraped from climbing rocks, and she'd handed me a seashell, smooth and pink. Keep this, she'd said. It's a reminder that even the roughest waves can make something beautiful. I still had that shell tucked in a drawer at home. I made a mental note to dig it out when I got back. You ever think about what's next? Rebecca asked, breaking the silence. She'd set her phone down, her eyes on me now. Like not just work or bills, but you, what you want. I took a sip of wine, the taste sharp and fruity. All the time, I admitted. I used to think I had it all figured out: marriage, kids, a house with a big backyard. Now, I don't know. I want to build something, though, something that's mine. She nodded, like she'd expected that. You will. You're already doing it. Look at you, new campaigns at work, therapy, kicking Daniel's ass in court. That's not nothing, Soph. I smiled, but her words stirred something deeper, a question I hadn't let myself ask yet. What did I want? Not just to survive, not just to prove I could stand on my own, but to live. Really live. I thought about my dad. the way he'd always talked about chasing dreams, even when life got hard. He'd wanted to open a hardware store, but he'd never gotten the chance. Too many bills, too many years spent working for someone else. I didn't want to look back in 20 years and wonder what I could have done if I'd been braver. The next morning, we hiked a trail along the cliffs, the path winding through tall grass and wildflowers. The air was crisp, the kind that makes your lungs feel clean, and I could hear gulls crying overhead. Rebecca was ahead, snapping photos with her phone, but I slowed down, letting the view sink in. The ocean stretched out forever, and for a moment, I felt like I was part of it. Vast, unmoored, full of possibility. I thought about my job, the way it paid the bills but didn't always light me up. I thought about the nonprofit campaign, how working on something meaningful had felt like a spark. Maybe that was a place to start. Back in the city. Life picked up its rhythm again. I moved out of Rebecca's place and into a small apartment downtown, a one-bedroom with creaky floors and a window that overlooked a park. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and I spent my first weekend there painting the walls a soft blue, the kind of color that feels like a deep breath. I hung a few photos, my parents, Rebecca and me at graduation, that old picture of me and my dad. I found the seashell too and set it on the windowsill, where it caught the morning light. Work was steady. But I started pitching ideas that felt riskier, projects that aligned with causes I cared about. Local shelters, youth programs, environmental groups. Karen, my boss, raised an eyebrow at first, but she saw the passion in my work and gave me the green light. One night, as I was sketching out a campaign for a women's advocacy group, I realized I was smiling. Not just working, not just surviving, but creating. It felt like a gift I'd given myself. Therapy with Ellen kept me grounded. We talked about trust, about how to rebuild it, not just with others, but with myself. You doubted your instincts with Daniel, she said one session, her voice gentle but firm. But look at what you did when you listened to them. You saved yourself. That stuck with me. I'd spent so long blaming myself for trusting him, but maybe the real strength was in how I'd clawed my way back. One afternoon, I was at the park near my apartment, sipping coffee and watching kids chase each other around a playground. The air smelled of cut grass, and I could hear the distant hum of traffic. My phone buzzed, a notification from LinkedIn. Daniel had updated his profile. Asterisk relocating to Chicago. New opportunities. I stared at it, waiting for the old ache to hit, but it didn't. He was gone, not just from my life, but from the city, from the spaces we'd shared. I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a quiet certainty that I was done with him. I deleted the app and leaned back on the bench, the sun warm on my face. A memory surfaced. Me at 8, riding my bike down our old street, the wind in my hair, my dad cheering from the driveway. "Keep going, Sophie," he'd shouted. "You've got this." I smiled, the kind of smile that starts in your chest and spreads slow. I did have this. Not a perfect life, not a fairy tale, but a life I was building piece by piece. Rebecca came over that night, bringing takeout and a bottle of wine. We sat on my couch, the windows open, the city alive outside. She told me about a new case, a client who reminded her of me. Strong, stubborn, ready to fight. I laughed, nudging her with my elbow. "You calling me stubborn?" "Damn right," she said, grinning. "And thank God for it." As we talked, I looked around my apartment. The blue walls, the seashell, the photos that told the story of who I was. I thought about the ocean, the cliffs, the way the world had felt so big and possible. I thought about my parents, their voices still guiding me. And I thought about myself, the woman I was becoming. Not perfect, not fearless, but whole. The future was uncertain, but it was mine, and I was ready to chase it, one brave step at a time. The city woke up slow on Sundays, the streets quiet except for the occasional jogger or dog walker. I'd started a ritual of morning walks through the park near my apartment, a thermos of coffee in hand, the air crisp with the promise of fall. The leaves were just starting to turn, flecks of gold and red against the green, and I liked the way the world felt new in those early hours. It was my time to think, to let my mind wander without the weight of emails or deadlines. Lately, I'd been thinking about roots, not just the kind that tie you to a place, but the kind that grow inside you, anchoring you to who you are. My new apartment had become a sanctuary, each corner a reflection of me. The seashell on the windowsill, the secondhand bookshelf crammed with novels and marketing books, the quilt my mom had made years ago draped over the couch. I'd even started cooking again, simple things like roasted vegetables or pasta with sauce from scratch. The first time I chopped garlic, the sharp scent filling the kitchen, I remembered Daniel standing at the stove, his sleeves rolled up, teasing me about my knife skills. The memory didn't sting like it used to. It was just a moment, one that belonged to a different version of me. Work was evolving too. The campaign for the women's advocacy group had launched, and the response was better than I'd hoped. Social media buzzed with shares, and the nonprofit's director called to thank me personally, her voice warm with gratitude. "You've given us a voice," she said, and I felt a swell of pride, the kind that comes from doing something bigger than yourself. Karen, my boss, pulled me aside a week later, her eyes bright. "Sophia, you're killing it. I'm putting you up for a senior consultant role. You in?" I blinked, caught off guard. A promotion. More responsibility, more impact. A year ago, I might have hesitated, worried about balancing it with Daniel's demands or the wedding plans. Now there was nothing holding me back. "I'm in," I said, my voice steady. She clapped me on the shoulder, and as I walked back to my desk, I felt a spark of something I hadn't in a long time: ambition, pure and unapologetic. That night, I celebrated alone. Not because I didn't have anyone to call, but because I wanted to. I poured a glass of wine, put on a jazz playlist, and sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker. I thought about my dad, how he'd always dreamed of something bigger but never quite reached it. I thought about my mom, her quiet strength, the way she'd faced her own struggles with grace. They'd given me that, dreams and resilience, and I was finally using both. The wine glass caught the light, and I raised it to the empty room. A silent toast to myself. Therapy with Ellen kept peeling back layers. We'd moved past Daniel mostly and started digging into what came next. "You've reclaimed your independence," she said one afternoon, her office warm with the scent of chamomile tea. "But what does that independence look like long term? What's the life you want to build?" I didn't have a clear answer, but I was starting to see pieces. I wanted work that mattered. I wanted connection. Friends, maybe family someday, but on my terms. And I wanted to trust again, not just others, but my own heart. One evening, I met Rebecca for dinner at a new restaurant downtown, a cozy place with exposed brick and candles flickering on every table. She was late as usual, rushing in with her hair slightly damp from a sudden rain. Sorry, she said, sliding into the booth. "Court ran long, and then my umbrella decided to die." She grinned, and I couldn't help but laugh. Rebecca had a way of making even the worst days feel lighter. We ordered pasta and a bottle of red, catching up on the small stuff. Her latest case, my promotion, the way the city felt different now that summer was gone. But then she leaned forward, her voice softening. "I got a call from Daniel's lawyer today." My fork paused midair, sauce dripping onto the plate. "What? Why?" She sighed, swirling her wine. "He's trying to appeal the settlement. Claims the video was taken out of context. It's a long shot, and I'm handling it, but I wanted you to know." I set my fork down, my stomach tightening. For a moment, I was back in the courtroom, the air thick with tension, Daniel's voice echoing through the speakers. I thought I'd left him behind, but here he was, clawing his way back into my life. "What does he want?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. Rebecca shrugged, but her eyes were sharp. "Control, probably. Or just to mess with you. He's not going to win, Soph. The evidence is ironclad, and the judge already saw through his act. But he's desperate, and desperate people do stupid things." I nodded, trying to process it. Part of me wanted to be angry, to feel the old fire flare up, but I was tired of giving him that power. "Let him try," I said finally. "He's not getting anything from me." Rebecca reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "That's my girl." The rest of dinner was lighter, but Daniel's shadow lingered. When I got home, I stood in my living room, the quiet pressing in. I thought about his text, the one about leaving town, and wondered if it had been a lie, another manipulation. I pulled out my laptop and checked his LinkedIn again, but the profile was gone, deleted or hidden. It didn't matter. He was a ghost now, and I wasn't going to let him haunt me. The next morning, I woke early, the sky still dark. I made coffee, the machine gurgling softly, and sat at my kitchen table with a notebook. I started writing, not about Daniel, but about me. Dreams, goals, things I wanted to chase, a trip to Italy maybe, to see the art my mom always talked about, a side project, something creative like the blog I'd started in college but abandoned, a life where I wasn't just reacting, but choosing. The pen moved fast, the words spilling out, and by the time the sun rose, I felt lighter, like I'd carved out a piece of the future. Dot work kept me busy, the senior consultant role looming closer. I was leading a team now, mentoring younger colleagues, and it felt good to share what I'd learned. One of them, a shy woman named Lila, reminded me of myself, eager but unsure, always second guessing her ideas. I took her under my wing, encouraging her to speak up in meetings, and watching her confidence grow was like seeing a piece of my own journey reflected back. One Saturday, I drove to the old house again. The yard was still a mess, but I brought a pair of gloves and started pulling weeds, the earth cool under my hands. It was hard work, but it felt right, like I was reclaiming something. A neighbor, an older man with a limp, wandered over, leaning on his cane. "You fixing this place up?" he asked, his voice gravelly. "Maybe," I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. "Just starting with the weeds for now." He nodded, like he understood more than I'd said. "Good to see it loved again. Your folks were good people." He tipped his hat and shuffled back to his house, leaving me with a warmth I couldn't quite name. As I drove home, the radio played a song my dad used to love, all twangy guitar and heartache. I sang along, my voice soft, and thought about the house, the yard, the life I was building. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew I was ready for it. The road stretched out, the city waiting, and I felt a quiet strength settle in my bones. I'd lost a lot, but I'd gained something too. Myself, whole and unbroken, ready to write the next chapter. The air in my apartment was cool, the kind of crisp that comes with October mornings when the windows are cracked open just enough to let the season in. I was curled up on the couch, a mug of tea steaming in my hands, the scent of chamomile mixing with the faint tang of city air. My notebook lay open on the coffee table, pages filled with the dreams I'd scribbled that morning by the kitchen window. Italy, a blog, a life of choices, not reactions. I traced the words with my eyes, feeling their weight, their possibility. For so long, I'd been running, from Daniel, from the pain, from myself. Now I was starting to feel like I was running towards something. Work was a whirlwind. The senior consultant role was official now, complete with a new office, small but with a window that let in the afternoon sun. I'd hung a photo of my parents on the wall, their smiles a quiet reminder of where I came from. Leading a team was both thrilling and daunting. There were moments when I'd look at Lila or the others, their eyes on me for guidance, and feel a flicker of doubt. Was I ready for this? But then I'd remember the courtroom, the way I'd stood tall and spoken my truth. If I could face Daniel's lies, I could handle a few client pitches and team meetings. One afternoon, I was reviewing a campaign draft when Rebecca called. Her voice was clipped, the way it got when she was in lawyer mode. "Good news," she said. "Daniel's appeal got thrown out. Judge didn't even entertain it. Said the evidence was overwhelmingly conclusive." "He's done, Soph." I leaned back in my chair, the city humming outside my window. I'd known the appeal was a long shot, but hearing it was over felt like cutting the last thread tying me to him. "Thanks, Becca," I said, my voice steady. "For everything." "Don't get sappy on me," she teased, but I could hear the warmth in her tone. "Dinner this weekend? My treat. We're celebrating." "Deal," I said, smiling. After we hung up, I sat there for a moment, staring at the photo of my parents. My dad's grin, my mom's gentle eyes. They'd have been proud, I thought, not just of the victory, but of the woman I was becoming. Someone who didn't let pain define her. That weekend, Rebecca and I met at a tapas place, all warm lighting and small plates piled with olives and patatas bravas. She was in high spirits, regaling me with stories about her latest case, her hands waving as she described a client who'd tried to smuggle evidence in a lunchbox. I laughed until my sides ached, the kind of laughter that feels like a release. Over dessert, a shared slice of flan that wobbled on the plate, she leaned forward, her eyes serious. "You're doing good, you know, really good." I stirred my coffee, the spoon clinking softly. "I'm trying. Some days are harder than others, but yeah, I feel like me again." She nodded, like she'd seen it all along. "You were always you, Soph. Just took a detour to remember it." Her words stayed with me as I walked home, the city alive around me, streetlights glowing, couples laughing outside bars, the distant wail of a siren. I thought about detours, about the paths we don't plan but end up shaping us. Daniel had been a detour, a painful one, but he'd led me here, to this moment, this version of myself. I passed a flower shop, the window filled with roses and lilies, and for a split second, I remembered the wedding flowers I'd chosen, the ones that never made it to the altar. The memory didn't hurt. It was just a ghost, passing through Dot at home. I started working on the blog I'd been dreaming about. Nothing fancy, just a space to write about life. Marketing tips, yes, but also the messier stuff. Heartbreak, resilience, starting over. I called it Asterisk, the long way home asterisk, a nod to the journey I was still on. The first post was about trust, how it breaks and how it mends, written in the quiet of my living room with the city buzzing outside. I hesitated before hitting publish, my finger hovering over the button. What if no one read it? What if it was too raw? But then I thought of Lila, her shy smile when I'd praised her work, and I clicked. This wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up. To my surprise, people read it. Not thousands, but a handful, colleagues, friends, even a few strangers who left comments about their own struggles. This hit home, one wrote. Thank you for being honest. I read the words again and again, my heart full. I'd spent so long feeling invisible, like my pain was something to hide. Now, sharing it felt like a kind of power, a way to turn the hurt into something that could help someone else. One Sunday. I drove back to my parents' old house. The weeds were gone now, the yard tidier after a few weekends of work. I'd started thinking about fixing it up, maybe renting it out, or even moving in someday. It wasn't just about the house, it was about roots, about claiming a piece of my past as I built my future. I walked through the rooms, the floors creaking under my boots, and found an old box in the attic. Inside were letters my parents had written to each other, faded ink on yellowed paper. I sat cross-legged on the dusty floor, reading my dad's words to my mom. Asterisk, you make every hard day worth it, Linda. We'll get there together. Tears pricked my eyes, not from sadness, but from the love they'd shared, the kind I still believed in, even after everything. That night, I wrote another blog post, this time about legacy, how the people we love leave pieces of themselves in us, even when they're gone. I wrote about my dad's hammer, my mom's seashell, the way their lessons had carried me through the darkest days. When I published it, I felt a quiet satisfaction, like I'd honored them in some small way. Months passed, and life settled into a rhythm that felt good. Not perfect, but good. Work was challenging, but rewarding. The blog was growing, and I was planning that trip to Italy, saving a little each month. Rebecca and I still had our wine nights, though now they were often at my place, the two of us laughing over old memories or dreaming about the future. I even started dating again. Not seriously, just coffee here, a walk there. I wasn't ready for love, not yet, but I was open to it. And that felt like progress. One evening, as I was watering the plants on my windowsill, my phone buzzed. A new comment on the blog from an anonymous reader. Asterisk, your story gave me the courage to leave a bad situation. Thank you. I stood there, the watering can dripping onto the floor, my chest tight with something like awe. I'd written those posts for myself, to make sense of my own pain, but they'd reach someone else, change something for them. It was a small thing, but it felt enormous, like a ripple I hadn't expected. I set the can down and looked out the window, the city sparkling below. A memory flickered. Me at 16, standing in my dad's garage, watching him sand a piece of wood, his hand steady. Life's like this, Sophie, he'd said. You keep working at it, even when it's rough. Eventually, it takes shape. I smiled, the kind of smile that feels like a promise. My life was taking shape, not the one I'd planned, but one I was choosing, one I was proud of. The road ahead was long, but I was walking it step by steady step, and for the first time, I knew I'd make it home. The city was dressed in winter now, the trees bare, their branches etched against a sky that seemed to hold its breath. I'd taken to wearing my dad's old scarf, a wool thing that smelled faintly of his aftershave, even after all these years. It was too big, looping twice around my neck, but it felt like a hug, a reminder that some things endure. My morning walks through the park had become a ritual, the crunch of frost under my boots a steady metronome to my thoughts. Today the air was sharp, stinging my cheeks, and I tucked my hands deeper into my coat pockets, the thermos of coffee warm against my side. I was thinking about time, how it stretches and folds, how a single year can feel like a lifetime dot. It had been almost a year since the courtroom, since I'd walked away from Daniel and the life I thought I'd have. The blog, asterisk, the long way home asterisk, was growing steadily, not viral, but steady, like a heartbeat. I'd posted twice a week, sometimes about work, sometimes about the small moments that felt big, like the way the light hit my apartment in the mornings or the smell of rain on the pavement. The comments kept coming, strangers sharing their own stories of betrayal, recovery, hope. Each one felt like a thread connecting me to a world I hadn't known was there. I wasn't just writing for myself anymore. I was writing for them too. Dot work was a balancing act. The senior consultant role meant longer hours, more decisions, but it also meant more impact. I'd started a mentorship program for the younger staff, inspired by Lila's growth. Watching her pitch her first campaign, her voice steady despite the nerves in her eyes, felt like a victory as big as any of my own. I remembered my early days in marketing, how I'd second guessed every word, how my first boss had taken a chance on me. Now I was paying it forwards, and it gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't expected. One afternoon, I was in a meeting presenting a new campaign for a literacy nonprofit when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it, focusing on the slides, but it buzzed again, insistent. After the meeting, I checked. A missed call from my mom, followed by a voicemail. Her voice was soft, a little shaky. Sophie, honey, just wanted to hear your voice. Call me when you can. My stomach tightened. She wasn't one for random calls, not since she and Dad moved to Florida. I stepped into the hallway, the office hum fading behind me, and dialed her back. Mom? Everything okay? I asked, leaning against the wall. She laughed, but it sounded thin. Oh, I'm fine, sweetheart. Just missing you. And, well, your dad's been a bit under the weather. Nothing serious, just a cough that won't quit. Doctor's checking it out. I gripped the phone tighter, the word asterisk, nothing asterisk echoing in my head. You sure it's not serious? Should I come down? No, no, she said quickly. We're handling it. I read your blog, Sophie. That post about your dad, the one about his hammer. It made me cry in a good way. I'm so proud of you. Her words hit me hard, a mix of warmth and worry. We talked for a while about our garden, about the blog, about the promotion. But when we hung up, the worry lingered. I thought about my dad, his broad hands, his laugh that could fill a room. He'd always seemed invincible, but time had a way of chipping away at even the strongest things. I booked a flight to Florida for the following month, telling myself it was just a visit, not a necessity. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, the blog open on my laptop. I started writing not about the campaign or the city, but about my parents, how their love had shaped me, how their voices still guided me. I wrote about my dad's cough, the fear it stirred, the way it made me want to hold on to every moment. The words poured out, raw and unpolished. And when I posted it, I felt a release, like I'd set something free. The response was overwhelming. Comments flooded in, people sharing stories of their own parents, their own fears of loss. One reader, a woman named Claire, wrote, "Your words made me call my mom tonight. We hadn't talked in months. Thank you." I read it 3 times, tears blurring the screen. I'd started the blog to make sense of my own life, but it was becoming something bigger, a bridge between strangers. A reminder that none of us are alone. Rebecca noticed the change in me. We were at her place, sprawled on her couch with takeout containers scattered on the coffee table. You're glowing, she said, pointing her chopsticks at me. Not like Instagram filter glowing, but real. What's going on? I laughed, picking at my noodles. I don't know, the blog maybe. Work. Knowing Daniel's out of my life for good. It's like I'm finally living for me, not just surviving. She nodded, her eyes soft. That's what I've been waiting to see. You're not just back, Soph. You're better. Her words stayed with me as I walked home, the city wrapped in a light fog. I thought about the girl I'd been a year ago, sitting at that kitchen table with bank statements, her world unraveling. I thought about the woman I was now, writing, leading, dreaming. The scars were still there, but they were part of me, like the lines in my dad's hands or the creases in my mom's quilt. When I got to Florida, the air was thick with humidity, the scent of oranges and salt. My parents' condo was small but bright, filled with photos and knickknacks from their life. My dad was thinner than I remembered, his cough a dry rattle, but his smile was the same, wide and warm. There's my hunter, he said, pulling me into a hug. I held on a little longer than usual, memorizing the feel of him. The doctors had found a shadow on his lung, something they were monitoring. It's not cancer, my mom said firmly, her hand on mine. Not yet, anyway. We're staying positive. I nodded, but the fear was there, a quiet ache. We spent the weekend together, cooking, laughing, watching old movies. One night, as my dad dozed on the couch, my mom and I sat on the patio, the stars bright above us. You're stronger than I ever was, she said, her voice low. I always knew you'd find your way. I reached for her hand, the skin soft and lined. I had good teachers, I said. And we sat there, the night wrapping around us like a promise dot. Back in the city, I threw myself into work and the blog, but my dad was never far from my thoughts. I called more often, sent silly postcards, planned another visit. The blog became a lifeline, a place to write about love and fear, about holding on and letting go. The readership grew, and I started getting emails from small publications asking if I'd write for them. I said yes to one, a piece about resilience, and seeing my name in print felt like a milestone, a sign I was on the right path. One morning, as I walked through the park, the frost sparkling under the sun, I stopped by a bench and sat, the thermos warm in my hands. A memory surfaced. Me at 10, riding my bike, my dad's voice cheering me on. Keep going, Sophie. I closed my eyes, the wind soft against my face, and felt him with me, not just in memory, but in the strength I carried. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building, dreaming, living. The road was long, but I was home, and I was ready for whatever came next. Winter tightened its grip on the city, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you crave the warmth of a crowded cafe or a well-worn blanket. I'd started lighting a candle in the evenings, a small one with a cedarwood scent that reminded me of the pine trees around my parents' old house. It flickered on my coffee table as I worked on the blog, my laptop balanced on my knees. The city a quiet hum beyond my window. Asterisk. The long way home asterisk had become more than a hobby now. It was a calling, a way to weave my story into the lives of others. Every comment, every email from a reader felt like a hand reaching out saying, asterisk, I see you. I've been there too. Asterisk. I was writing a new post about fear, about how it can hold you back but also push you forward. I wrote about my dad's cough, the shadow on his lung, the way it had made me cherish every phone call, every laugh. I wrote about standing in the courtroom a year ago, my heart pounding as I handed over the evidence that would unravel Daniel's lies. Fear had been there, but so had courage, and the two were tangled together like roots beneath the earth. When I hit publish, my hands were steady, but my chest was tight with the vulnerability of it all. Sharing the raw parts of myself was still hard, but it was also freeing, like opening a window after a long winter. The response was immediate. Comments poured in, stories of illness, loss, triumphs born from fear. One reader, a man named Tom, wrote, My wife's been sick for years. Your post reminded me to keep showing up, even when it's hard. Thank you. I read it in the quiet of my apartment, the candlelight dancing on the walls, and felt a swell of gratitude. I wasn't just telling my story anymore. I was holding space for others. And that felt like a kind of magic. Work was a steady pulse, the senior consultant role stretching me in ways I hadn't expected. I was leading bigger campaigns now, collaborating with nonprofits and small businesses, crafting messages that felt like they mattered. Lila had become my right hand, her confidence growing with every project. One day, as we brainstormed ideas for a community health initiative, she looked at me, her pen tapping the table. You're different from other bosses, she said, almost shy. You actually care. I smiled, caught off guard. I just want to do work that means something, I said, and I want you to feel like you're part of it. She nodded, and I saw a spark in her eyes, the same one I'd felt when I realized I could build a life on my own terms. Later, as I walked to my car, the city glittering under a fresh layer of snow, I thought about her words. Caring had always been my strength, but it had also been my weakness, the thing that let Daniel in. Now I was learning to care fiercely, but with boundaries, like a fire that warms without burning. Rebecca and I had our usual wine night, this time at a bar near my apartment. A cozy spot with velvet curtains and a jazz trio in the corner. She was in rare form, recounting a courtroom showdown that had her opposing counsel scrambling. The guy thought he could out-talk me, she said, grinning over her glass. Big mistake, I laughed, the sound mingling with the saxophone's low hum. But then her expression shifted, softer now. You heard anything from Daniel lately? I shook my head, swirling my wine. Nothing. His LinkedIn's gone, his number's blocked. He's a ghost. Good, she said, her voice firm. But if he ever tries anything, you tell me. I've got a file on him thicker than a phone book. I chuckled, but her words stirred a memory. The text he'd sent, I'm leaving town. I'm sorry. I hadn't believed it then, and I didn't now. Daniel was a manipulator, and manipulators don't just disappear. Still, I wasn't afraid of him anymore. He'd taken enough from me, and I wasn't giving him another piece. The trip to Florida was a week away, and I was counting down the days. My dad's latest test had come back stable. No growth in the shadow, no new concerns. But the relief was tempered by the knowledge that stability wasn't a guarantee. I'd been calling more, sending silly texts with photos of the city blanketed in snow. He'd reply with pictures of his garden, the oranges ripening despite the heat. Your mom's making marmalade, he wrote once. You're getting a jar. I smiled every time I saw his name on my screen, but the ache was there. A quiet reminder to hold on tight. One evening, I got an email from a literary agent. She'd read my blog, loved the piece I'd written for the magazine, and wanted to talk about a book. Your voice is powerful, she wrote. I think you have a story to tell. I sat there, the cursor blinking, my heart racing. A book. The idea felt huge, almost too big, but it also felt right, like a door I'd been walking toward without realizing it. I replied, setting up a call, and spent the rest of the night jotting down ideas. Chapters about betrayal, rebuilding, the small moments that make a life. The call with the agent, Sarah, was surreal. She was warm but direct, her voice crackling with energy. Your blog is special because it's honest, she said. People connect with that. I think a memoir could do the same, but bigger. We talked about themes, trust, resilience, the way pain shapes us, and by the end, I was dizzy with possibility. Let's start with a proposal, she said. No pressure, just write what feels true. I hung up, the apartment quiet except for the hum of the radiator, and felt a spark I hadn't in years. Not just ambition, but purpose. I started the proposal that weekend, writing at my kitchen table, the candle burning low. I wrote about the courtroom, the video, the way Daniel's voice had echoed like a confession. But I also wrote about my dad's hammer, my mom's seashell, the blog comments that kept me going. It was my story, but it was also a story about anyone who'd ever had to start over. The words flowed, and for the first time, I didn't doubt them. They were mine, and they were enough. When I flew to Florida, the plane was full, the air thick with chatter and the scent of coffee. I landed in the late afternoon, the sun a fierce orange, and my mom was waiting at the gate, her smile wide. You're too skinny, she said, pulling me into a hug. I laughed, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume. My dad was at home resting, and when I saw him, my heart clenched. He was frailer, but his eyes were bright, his voice steady as he teased me about the snow. You city girls, he said, shaking his head. I come back to the sun. We spent the days together, simple moments that felt sacred. Cooking breakfast, watching the sunset, laughing over old stories. One night, as we sat on the patio, my dad took my hand, his grip still strong. You're doing good, Sophie, he said. I always knew you would. I squeezed his hand, tears in my eyes, and felt the weight of his love, the kind that carries you through anything. Back in the city, I kept writing, the proposal taking shape. The blog grew, the book deal loomed closer, and I felt myself expanding, filling the spaces I'd once thought were lost. One morning, as I walked through the park, the snow soft under my boots, I stopped and looked at the sky, gray and endless. A memory flickered. Me at 12, my dad teaching me to skip stones, his voice steady. Keep trying, Sophie. You'll get it. I smiled, the cold air sharp in my lungs. I'd gotten it, not just the stones, but the life I was building, the woman I was becoming. The road was still long, but I was home and I was ready for the journey. Spring crept into the city like a shy guest, the air softening, the trees budding with a green so tender it seemed to glow. I'd swapped my dad's scarf for a lighter jacket, but I still carried the weight of his love in the way I moved through the world. My morning walks in the park were brighter now, the frost replaced by dew that sparkled in the early light. I'd started noticing the small things again, the way a sparrow hopped along a bench, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery on the corner. It was as if the world was waking up, and I was waking up with it. Dot. The blog had become a steady rhythm, a place where I poured my thoughts and found echoes in the stories readers shared. Asterisk the long way home. Asterisk wasn't just about me anymore. It was a tapestry of voices, each comment a thread weaving us together. I'd started a newsletter, a monthly dispatch with longer essays and a few personal updates, and the response was humbling. People wrote back, not just about my words, but about their lives: divorces, new beginnings, quiet triumphs. One woman, Emily, sent a long email about leaving an abusive marriage, her words raw and hopeful. Your blog made me feel less alone, she wrote. I printed that one out. Tucking it into a drawer like a talisman. Dot work was a whirlwind, but the kind that felt exhilarating. The mentorship program was thriving, and Lila had just landed her first solo campaign, a small but meaningful project for a local food bank. I watched her present it in a team meeting, her voice clear, her slides sharp, and felt a pride that was almost maternal. After, she hugged me in the hallway, her eyes bright. I couldn't have done this without you, she said. I shook my head, smiling. You did this, Lila. I just gave you a nudge. But as I walked back to my office, I felt the truth of it. We were lifting each other up, and that was its own kind of power. Dot. The book proposal was nearly done, a stack of pages that felt like a piece of my soul. Sarah, the agent, was thrilled, sending notes that were both encouraging and precise. This is it, Sophia, she wrote after my latest draft. It's honest, it's universal, it's you. We were pitching to publishers soon, and the thought made my stomach flutter, not with fear, but with anticipation. I'd started dreaming about the book, imagining it on shelves, its cover simple but bold, my name in clean type. It wasn't about fame or money. It was about leaving something behind, a marker of the road I'd traveled. Dot. My dad's health was a quiet undercurrent, always there but not always spoken. His latest scans were stable, the shadow unchanged, but he was tired more often. His voice softer on our calls. My mom filled the gaps with her chatter, stories about their neighbors or the stray cat they'd started feeding. He's stubborn as ever, she said once, laughing. Won't let me carry the groceries. I smiled, but the ache was there, a reminder to savor every moment. I'd planned another trip to Florida for the summer, already picturing the three of us on their patio, the air thick with the scent of jasmine and salt. One evening, I was at Rebecca's, the two of us sprawled on her couch with a pizza box open between us. She was scrolling through her phone, muttering about a new case, when she paused, her eyes narrowing. You see this? She said, turning the screen toward me. It was a news article, small but unmistakable. Asterisk local financial advisor faces fraud charges. Daniel's name was there, along with a grainy photo, his face harder than I remembered, his eyes hollow. I took the phone, scanning the article. He'd been caught in a scheme, siphoning funds from clients, the same kind of manipulation he'd tried with me. The charges were serious, with a trial pending. I handed the phone back, my hands steady, my heart quiet. Karma, I said, and Rebecca snorted. More like justice, she said. He thought he could keep playing the same game. Guess he ran out of luck. I nodded, but I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd expected. Daniel's downfall wasn't my victory, it was just a consequence, a ripple from the choices he'd made. I thought about the man I'd loved, the one who'd kissed me under streetlights, and realized he was gone, if he'd ever existed at all. The man in that article was a stranger, and I was free of him. The next day, I wrote a blog post about forgiveness, not the kind that excuses, but the kind that lets you go. I wrote about Daniel, not by name, but as a shadow I'd carried and released. I wrote about my dad, how his love had taught me to forgive myself for trusting too much. When I posted it, the comments were gentle, full of understanding. One reader, a woman named Mariah, wrote, Forgiving myself was the hardest part. Thank you for showing me it's possible. I read it in the morning light, my coffee cooling, and felt a quiet strength settle in my bones. The pitch to publishers came a week later. Sarah set up virtual meetings, and I spent hours preparing, practicing my answers in front of my bathroom mirror, my reflection a mix of nerves and determination. The first meeting was with a small press, the editor a woman with a warm smile and sharp questions. Why this story? She asked, leaning into her webcam. I took a breath, thinking of my dad's hammer, my mom's seashell, the readers who'd found solace in my words. Because it's not just my story, I said. It's everyone's who's ever had to rebuild. She nodded, and I saw something in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or respect. 2 weeks later, Sarah called with news. The press wanted the book. A modest advance, a tight timeline, but a deal. I stood in my kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, and laughed, the sound bubbling up like a spring. We did it, Sarah said, her voice bright. Now the real work starts. I hung up, the apartment quiet, and looked at the seashell on my windowsill, its pink curves catching the light. I'd done it. Not just the book, but the life I was building piece by piece. I called my parents that night, the words spilling out. My dad's voice was hoarse but proud. That's my girl, he said, and I could hear his smile. My mom cried, then laughed, promising to buy the first copy. We'll have a party, she said, marmalade and all. I laughed too, the sound mingling with theirs, a warmth that carried me through the night. The blog kept growing, the book took shape, and I felt myself stretching, filling the spaces I'd once thought were empty. One morning, as I walked through the park, the air sweet with blooming flowers, I stopped by the pond, the water still and clear. A memory flickered, me at 8, my dad teaching me to fish, his hand steady as he showed me how to cast. Patience, Sophie, he'd said. The good things take time. I smiled, the sun warm on my face. I'd been patient, and the good things were here. Not perfect, but real. A book, a purpose, a life I loved. The road was still unfolding, but I was home and I was ready for whatever lay ahead. The park was alive with the hum of spring, the pond reflecting a sky so blue it seemed to promise forever. I stood there, the warmth of the sun soaking into my skin, my dad's words echoing in my mind. Asterisk patience, Sophie. The good things take time. I'd waited, I'd worked, and now, standing by the water with the world blooming around me, I felt the truth of it. The book deal, the blog, the life I was carving out, they weren't just achievements. They were proof that I'd found my way home, not to a place, but to myself. The next few months were a blur of creation. The book manuscript consumed me. Late nights at my kitchen table, the cedarwood candle burning low, its light dancing across pages filled with my truth. I wrote about the courtroom, the betrayal, the way Daniel's voice on that video had cracked my world open. But I also wrote about the mending, my dad's hammer, my mom's seashell, the readers who'd become my lifeline. Sarah, my agent, read the first draft and called me, her voice thick with emotion. This is going to touch people, Sophia, she said. It's not just a story, it's a hand reaching out. I hung up, my chest tight, and looked at the seashell on my windowsill, its curves worn smooth by time. I was reaching, and people were reaching back. Work was a steady anchor, the senior consultant role stretching me in ways that felt both challenging and right. The mentorship program had grown, with Lila now leading her own small team. I watched her one afternoon, guiding a new hire through a pitch, her confidence a quiet fire. She caught my eye and smiled, a nod of gratitude, and I felt a swell of pride. I'd been her nudge, but she was her own spark, and that was the kind of legacy I wanted to leave. People who believed in themselves because I'd believed in them first. My dad's health was a shadow that never quite lifted. His scans remained stable, but his energy ebbed, his cough a constant reminder of time's weight. I flew to Florida again in June, the air heavy with heat and the scent of blooming oleander. My parents' condo was the same, bright, cluttered with memories. But my dad moved slower, his hands trembling as he poured coffee. Still concurrent linked Q, his eyes lit up when he saw me, his voice warm. My writer, he said, pulling me into a hug. I held on, memorizing the feel of his flannel shirt, the way his laugh still rumbled like thunder. My mom and I took walks in the evenings, the sky streaked with pink and gold. She talked about their life, the small joys, a new recipe, a neighbor's birthday party. But I could see the worry in her eyes, the way she glanced at my dad when she thought I wasn't looking. One night, as we sat on their patio, the stars bright above us, she took my hand. You're our strength, Sophie, she said, her voice soft. You always have been. I squeezed her hand, tears prickling, and thought about the girl I'd been, the one who'd trusted too easily, loved too blindly. That girl was still part of me, but she was wiser now, tempered by pain and polished by resilience. Back in the city, I got word about Daniel. Rebecca called me one morning, her voice sharp with satisfaction. He's done, she said, pleaded guilty to the fraud charges. No trial, just a sentence. 3 years plus restitution. He's broke, Soph, and his reputation's in the gutter. I stood in my kitchen, the coffee machine gurgling, and waited for the rush of triumph. It didn't come. Instead, I felt a quiet finality, like closing a book I'd never wanted to read. Daniel's fall wasn't my victory. It was his reckoning, a consequence he'd built with his own hands. I thought about the man I'd loved, the one who'd promised me forever and realized he was gone, replaced by a stranger who'd never known how to love at all. The news spread quietly, a footnote in the city's financial circles. A colleague mentioned it over lunch, her tone casual. Heard about that green guy? Total con artist. I nodded, stirring my soup, and changed the subject. Daniel's shame was his own, and I had no room for it in my life. I'd spent too long carrying his weight, and now I was traveling light. The book, Asterisk, The Long Way Home Asterisk, was published the following spring. The launch was small, a bookstore downtown with creaky floors and the smell of old paper. Rebecca was there, grinning as she held a copy, her pride louder than words. Lila came too, shyly asking me to sign hers, and I wrote, Asterisk to Lila, who's already found her spark. My parents couldn't make it. My dad's health kept them in Florida, but they sent a video, their faces glowing on my phone. We're so proud, Sophie, my mom said, her voice breaking. My dad just smiled, his eyes saying everything. Readers came. Some I knew, some strangers whose names I recognized from blog comments. Emily, the woman who'd left her abusive marriage, hugged me, her eyes wet. You gave me courage, she whispered, and I felt my own tears rise. The signing lasted hours, each conversation a gift, each story a reminder that my words had wings. As I signed the last book, the bookstore quiet except for the hum of voices, I looked at the stack of covers. My name, my story, my heart. I'd built this, not from the ashes of betrayal, but from the strength I'd found within life after the book was different. Not in a loud way, but in the quiet shifts that matter. The blog grew, the newsletter became a weekly ritual, and I started speaking at small events, libraries, community centers, places where people gathered to share their stories. I talked about resilience, about finding your way after loss, and every time I saw nods, tears, hands raised with questions that felt like trust. I wasn't a celebrity, and I didn't want to be. I was just Sophia, a woman who'd walked a hard road and found a way to light it for others. My dad's health declined that summer. The shadow on his lung grew, and by fall he was in hospice, his body frail but his spirit fierce. I spent weeks in Florida, sleeping on a cot in their living room, holding his hand as he told stories of his youth, fixing cars, dancing with my mom under streetlights. My mom was a rock, her strength quiet but unyielding, and we leaned on each other, laughing through tears, cherishing every moment. When he passed, the world felt smaller, the air thinner. But as I stood by his grave, the sun warm on my shoulders, I felt him with me. His hammer, his lessons, his love. I wrote about him in the blog, a post that took weeks to finish, each word a piece of my heart. He taught me to keep going, I wrote, to build something strong, even when the world tries to break you. The comments were a flood of love, readers sharing their own losses, their own anchors. I read them in my apartment, the seashell glowing in the morning light, and felt my dad's presence, not gone, but woven into me. The years that followed were full, not with grand gestures, but with the steady beauty of a life well lived. I kept writing, publishing essays, speaking when asked. The book found its way into libraries, into hands that needed it, and every letter from a reader felt like a gift. Work evolved. I left the agency to start my own consultancy, focusing on nonprofits, building campaigns that changed lives. Lila joined me, her fire a perfect match for mine, and together we grew something meaningful. Rebecca remained my rock, our wine nights a sacred tradition. She got married, a small ceremony on a rooftop, and I was her maid of honor, teasing her as she blushed through her vows. I dated too, not rushing, but open to connection. There was a man, a quiet architect with kind eyes, who made me laugh and held my hand on long walks. It wasn't forever, not yet, but it was enough, a reminder that love could be gentle, not a storm. I visited my mom often, her condo now a shrine to my dad's memory. We cooked his recipes, laughed over his stories, kept him alive in the small ways that matter. The house up north, my parents' old place, became mine again. I fixed it up, weekends spent painting and planting, the yard blooming with flowers my mom had loved. I didn't live there, but it was a refuge, a place to remember who I was. One spring, years later, I walked through the park, the pond shimmering under a sky as blue as that first day I'd felt truly free. I was older now, my hair streaked with gray, my hands lined with time. The blog was still there, quieter now, but still a home for stories. I'd written a second book, not a memoir, but a collection of essays about the people who'd shaped me: my parents, Rebecca, the readers who'd become my community. I stopped by the pond, the air sweet with lilacs, and thought about Daniel, a name that no longer carried weight. He'd served his time, disappeared into a life I didn't care to know. His defeat wasn't my story, it was his, a shadow that had faded with the years. My story was this: the woman I'd become, the life I'd built, the love I'd carried through it all. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the seashell my mom had given me decades ago. It was smooth, its pink faded but still beautiful. I held it to the light, then set it gently on the grass by the water, a quiet offering to the girl I'd been, the woman I was, the journey that had brought me here. The wind stirred, soft against my skin, and I walked on, my steps steady, my heart full. Home wasn't a place, it was me, whole and unbroken, forever on the way.